The summer rain hammers down on the rural market of Damyang with the fury of a broken heart, and Kang Haiwan runs through it like her life depends on it. Her arms strain under the weight of wooden crates filled with perfect peaches, each one representing hours of careful tending, her family's livelihood, and dreams as fragile as the fruit's delicate skin. At 26, she has never known luxury, never craved it, never imagined that her simple world could collide so violently with forces beyond her comprehension. The sweet aroma of ripe peaches mingles with the scent of wet earth and impending thunder, creating a sensory symphony that defines everything pure about her existence. Every drop of rain that streaks down her flushed face tells a story of honest labor, of sunrise mornings in the orchard, of calloused hands that know the texture of bark and the weight of responsibility. This is her universe, small, authentic, and about to be shattered by a man whose very presence in her town is built on deception. Yoon Jae-hyun stands under the awning of Kim's general store, watching this girl struggle against nature with an intensity that stops his breath. At 30, he has commanded boardrooms, crushed competitors, built an empire on the foundation of calculated moves and emotional distance. Yet something about her desperate grace, the way she shields those peaches like they're made of gold, awakens something in his chest he thought died years ago. When she stumbles and the precious cargo scatters across the wet pavement, rolling like fallen stars into the storm, he moves without thought. His designer watch, carefully hidden under his sleeve, catches rainwater as he kneels in the mud, his hands joining hers in a frantic rescue of fruit that means everything to her and nothing to his bank account. But in that moment, as their fingers touch over a bruised peach, something fundamental shifts in both their worlds. She sees kindness where she expected indifference from a stranger. He sees authenticity where his life has known only carefully crafted masks. "Are you okay?" The words escape him with a softness that contradicts the natural authority he spent weeks trying to suppress. This is Lee Jun-ho, the humble accountant from Seoul, not Yoon Jae-hyun, the CEO who could buy this entire town with his quarterly bonus. But looking into her worried brown eyes, feeling the tremor in her rain-soaked hands, he realizes that the lie he came here to live might be the only truth that matters. The rain continues to fall, washing away the careful boundaries he's built around his heart, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, both their destinies change forever. Before we dive into Haiwan's journey in the heart of rural Korea, I want to welcome you to our story. The Hallyu Wave connects fans across every continent, and I'd love to know how far our drama has traveled today. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your city and country. Now our story begins. 3 weeks before the rain that would change everything, Yoon Jae-hyun made the most radical decision of his 30 years. Standing in his penthouse office overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, surrounded by financial reports that painted his success in cold, hard numbers, he felt the weight of his own emptiness pressing down like a physical force. "Sir, the board meeting is in 10 minutes, his secretary announced through the intercom, her voice carrying the same rehearsed deference he heard from everyone in his orbit. They told him what he wanted to hear, agreed with his every decision, laughed at his jokes not because they were funny, but because he signed their paychecks. The loneliness was suffocating. The plan crystallized with startling clarity. Disappear, become someone else. See his family's rural operations through the eyes of an ordinary man, not the heir to an empire. For the first time in his adult life, he would taste freedom, the terrifying, exhilarating freedom of being nobody special. Now, as Lee Jun-ho, he sits in the cramped bus heading toward Damyang, his reflection in the window showing a man transformed. The expensive suits are replaced by simple slacks and cotton shirts. His perfectly styled hair has grown out, swept casually to one side. Most importantly, The invisible armor of privilege has been stripped away, leaving him vulnerable in ways he never imagined possible. The landscape outside shifts from urban concrete to rolling hills painted in every shade of green. Rice paddies stretch toward mountains that seem to touch the sky, and for the first time in years, Jae-hyun feels his shoulders relax. No one here knows his name. No one here wants anything from him except perhaps basic human courtesy. The bus stops in the town center, and he steps into a world that moves at nature's pace. Elderly men play baduk under the shade of ancient trees. Children chase each other down narrow streets while their mothers call warnings that carry the musical cadence of rural dialect. The air itself tastes different, cleaner, somehow sweeter. His modest apartment above the hardware store is a universe away from his penthouse palace. The wooden floors creak under his feet. The single window offers a view of mountains instead of skyscrapers, and the silence at night is so profound it initially keeps him awake. But gradually, that silence becomes a balm to his overworked mind. The Yoon Industries satellite office in town is a small functional building where he's assigned to audit the agricultural supply contracts. His cover story is simple. He's an accountant transferred from headquarters to ensure everything runs smoothly in the rural operations. The local manager, Mr. Park, treats him with polite respect, but no special deference. Exactly what Jae-hyun craved without knowing it. On his third day reviewing supplier records in the air-conditioned office, he first hears her laugh. The sound drifts through the open window like music, genuine, uninhibited, bright as sunlight on water. He looks up from his spreadsheets to see a young woman outside, chatting with Mrs. Lee, who runs the lunch cart. Her hair catches the afternoon light, and when she throws her head back in laughter at something the older woman said, Jae-hyun feels something stir in his chest that has nothing to do with business strategies or profit margins. He doesn't know yet that she's Kang Hae-won, daughter of the family that supplies the sweetest peaches in the region. He doesn't know that her laughter comes so easily because her heart has never learned to guard itself against the world. All he knows is that for the first time in his careful, calculated life, he wants to be the reason someone laughs like that. The next morning, he finds an excuse to walk past the market where she sells her family's produce. The Damyang morning market awakens with the sun, transforming the quiet town square into a tapestry of colors, sounds, and scents that assault Jae-hyun's city-dulled senses. Vendors arrange their offerings with the pride of artists, perfect pyramids of apples, bundles of vegetables still damp with dew, handmade noodles stretched like silk threads in the early light. And there, at a modest stall beneath a faded blue tarp, sits Kang Hae-won. She's counting change for an elderly customer, her fingers moving with the quick efficiency of someone who's handled money since childhood. Her hair is pulled back in a practical ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She wears a simple white blouse that's seen many washings, dark jeans with honest stains on the knees, and boots that have walked countless miles on unpaved roads. Jae-hyun approaches slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs for reasons he can't name. He's negotiated billion-won deals with stone-cold composure, but the thought of speaking to this girl makes his palms sweat inside his pockets. "Good morning," he says, his voice coming out rougher than intended. She looks up, and her smile hits him like a physical force. "Oh, you're the new accountant, aren't you? Mr. Lee Jun-ho?" Her eyes are warm brown, flecked with gold in the morning sunlight. "Mrs. Park mentioned you'd arrived from Seoul." He nods, not trusting his voice. This close, he can smell the faint scent of peaches that seems to cling to her skin, mixed with something else, soap, sunshine, and an indefinable sweetness that belongs only to her. "These look incredible," he manages, gesturing toward the fruit display. Each peach is perfectly formed, blushed with pink and gold, arranged with care that speaks to genuine pride in craftsmanship. "Thank you." Her smile widens. "They're from our family orchard. Papa says this season's crop is the best he's seen in 10 years. She selects one, holding it out to him. "Here, try this." Their fingers brush as he takes the fruit, and Jae-hyun swears he feels electricity travel up his arm. The peach is warm from the sun, firm yet yielding, and when he bites into it, juice runs down his chin in a way that would mortify him in any Seoul restaurant. But Hae-won just laughs, that music he heard through his office window, and offers him a paper napkin. "Good?" she asks, and there's something in her expression, a hope that his approval means something real to her. "Perfect," he says, and means it. The sweetness explodes across his tongue, complex and natural in a way no expensive dessert has ever achieved. "How do you grow them like this?" Her face lights up with passion. "It's all about the soil. Papa taught me that the earth tells you what it needs if you learn how to listen. We don't use chemicals, just compost, patience, and a lot of love." Love. The word hangs in the air between them, innocent in her mouth but loaded with implications he doesn't dare examine. A customer approaches, and Hae-won turns to serve them with the same genuine warmth she showed him. Jae-hyun watches her work, noting the way she remembers everyone's names, asks about their families, includes a few extra vegetables in the bags of regular customers who look like they're stretching their budgets. This is business conducted with the heart, not the calculator. Every transaction is a relationship, not a conquest. The profit margins are thin, but the connections are rich. It's everything his corporate world is not. "Are you planning to stay long in Damyang?" she asks when the other customer leaves, beginning to reorganize her display with unconscious grace. "I'm not sure," he answers honestly. The original plan was 3 weeks, maybe 4. Enough time to identify inefficiencies, write his report, and return to Seoul with valuable insights that would impress the board. But looking at her now, watching the way the morning light catches in her hair, he can't imagine voluntarily walking away from this. "Well, I hope you like it here," she says. "It's not exciting like Seoul, but it's peaceful. Sometimes I think peace is worth more than excitement." If only she knew how desperately he's been craving exactly that peace. If only he could tell her that in 3 days in this small town, he's felt more alive than in 3 years of corporate warfare. "I'm beginning to understand that," he says carefully. She studies his face with those perceptive brown eyes, and for a moment, he fears she can see through his carefully constructed facade. But then she smiles again, and he realizes she's simply seeing something good in him, something that might actually exist beneath all his deception.
"You should come by the farm sometime," she says casually, but there's a flutter in her voice that suggests the invitation means more than she's admitting. "We're always happy to show city people how we grow things here." The word yes is on his tongue before his rational mind can intervene. This is dangerous territory. Getting closer to her, spending time on the family property, deepening a connection built on lies.
But looking into her hopeful eyes, feeling the genuine kindness radiating from her like warmth from a fire, he finds he doesn't care about danger. "I'd like that very much," he says. And just like that, his carefully planned deception becomes something else entirely. The Kang family farm sits in a valley cupped by gentle hills, as if the earth itself decided this spot deserved special protection. Jae-hyun follows the dirt road that winds between ancient stone walls. His rental car, a modest sedan chosen to maintain his cover, struggling with the unpaved surface. Through the windshield, he watches the landscape transform from ordinary countryside into something that feels almost magical. Peach trees stretch in neat rows across the sloping fields, their branches heavy with fruit that catches the afternoon sunlight like hanging jewels. Between the orchard rows he glimpses neat vegetable gardens, a small greenhouse, and what appears to be a traditional Hanok-style farmhouse with dark wooden beams and terracotta roof tiles weathered to soft gray. Haewon emerges from behind the house as he parks, wiping her hands on a canvas apron that's paint-stained and well-loved. She's changed from her market clothes into work pants and a faded blue shirt with sleeves rolled to her elbows, revealing arms that are slender but strong. Her hair is escaping from its ponytail in wisps that catch the light, and there's a smudge of dirt on her cheek that somehow makes her more beautiful, not less. "Junho?" She waves, and his false name sounds like music in her voice. "You found us." He gets out of the car, and immediately the scents of the farm envelop him. Earth and growing things, the sweet perfume of ripening fruit, the green smell of healthy plants drinking sunlight. It's overwhelming after years of air conditioning and city pollution, so rich and alive that he has to take a moment to adjust. "This is incredible," he says, meaning it completely. The farm has a quality he's never encountered in all his travels to international properties and luxury locations. It feels like home, even though he's never had a home that felt like anything but an expensive hotel room. "Come meet my parents," Haewon says, leading him toward the house. "Mama's been cooking all afternoon because I mentioned you might visit." Panic flickers in his chest. Meeting her parents feels like crossing a line, making this deception somehow more real and more dangerous. But before he can invent an excuse, the front door opens and a woman emerges who could only be Haewon's mother. Jong Hye-jin has her daughter's warm eyes and gentle smile, but there's something else there, a wisdom that speaks of decades spent reading people, understanding their hearts beneath whatever masks they might wear. She's dressed simply in a floral blouse and comfortable pants, her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, but she carries herself with a dignity that no amount of money could purchase. "So you're the young man from Seoul," she says, studying him with maternal interest. "Haewon says you've never seen a working farm before." "That's right, Mrs. Kang," he replies, bowing with genuine respect. The lie sits heavier on his tongue now, surrounded by such authentic warmth. "Thank you for welcoming me." "Nonsense," she laughs. "Anyone who appreciates our peaches is family here. Come sit. You must be hungry." The next hour passes like a dream. They sit on the wooden porch of the farmhouse, sharing a meal that Mrs. Kang insists is nothing special, but tastes like everything he never knew he was missing. Fresh kimchi with the perfect balance of heat and tang, rice that still holds the memory of earth and rain, vegetables that were growing in the garden that morning, and meat grilled to perfection over charcoal that adds its own subtle smoke. Haewon's father, Kang Seok-jin, arrives as they're finishing the main course, his hands still bearing traces of honest dirt, despite thorough washing. He's a man of few words but deep kindness, studying Jae-hyun with the careful assessment of someone who's learned to judge character through years of dealing with suppliers, customers, and the sometimes harsh realities of agricultural life. "So, Seoul," he says finally, settling onto the porch with a cup of tea. "What brings a city accountant to our little corner of the world?" Jae-hyun delivers his rehearsed answer about auditing rural operations, about wanting to understand the agricultural supply chain from the ground up. The words feel increasingly hollow in this setting, surrounded by the reality of what these people have built through generations of hard work and dedication. "Good to understand where things come from." Mr. Kang nods approvingly. "Too many people these days think food just appears in the store. Money just appears in the bank. Everything starts with the earth, with people willing to tend it properly." As the sun begins its descent toward the hills, Haewon stands and brushes crumbs from her apron. "Want to see the orchard before it gets dark?" Walking between the peach trees as golden hour paints everything in warm light, Jae-hyun feels something inside his chest loosening, a tension he's carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. Heywan moves through the rows with unconscious grace, occasionally reaching up to test the firmness of a fruit or adjust a branch that's grown too heavy with its burden. "Papa planted most of these trees when I was little," she says, running her palm along smooth bark. "He always said that farming is an act of faith. You plant something today, trusting that tomorrow will come, that the seasons will continue, that your children will be there to harvest what you've started." The concept is foreign to Jae-hyun's world of quarterly reports and immediate results. In corporate life, everything is measured in short-term gains and competitive advantages that last only until the next innovation makes them obsolete. But these trees represent decades of patient investment, of trust in processes larger than any individual ambition. "Do you ever want to leave?" he asks without thinking. "See the world beyond the farm?" She considers this seriously, pausing in her walk to look toward the mountains that ring their valley. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like," she admits, "especially when I see dramas about people living in big cities having adventures. But then I think about how my great-grandmother planted the first peach tree on this land, how my grandmother learned to read the seasons from her, how my mother taught me the recipes that turn our harvest into something special." She touches another tree, and he sees the connection in that simple gesture. Generations of women who found their purpose in nurturing life from the earth. "I'm part of something bigger than just myself," she continues. "That feels important. Does that make sense?" More sense than she could possibly know. His entire life has been about building his own empire, accumulating personal power, winning individual battles. But watching her tend to these trees, seeing the way her family works together with such evident love and respect, he's beginning to understand what he's been missing. "It makes perfect sense," he says quietly. The sun has nearly set when they return to the house, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that no city lights could rival. Mrs. Kang insists on sending him home with a bag of fresh produce and a container of leftover banchan, pressing them into his hands with the kind of generosity that expects nothing in return. "Come back anytime," she says. "You're always welcome here." Driving back to town through the gathering darkness, Jae-hyun finds himself thinking about faith, not the religious kind, but the deeper trust in life itself that allows someone to plant trees they might not live to see fully mature. For the first time in his adult life, he wonders what it might feel like to invest in something beyond his own advancement, to be part of a story larger than his individual ambitions. The bag of peaches on his passenger seat fills the car with their sweet fragrance, and he realizes that this simple gift represents something he's never had: the unconditional kindness of people who ask nothing more than that. He appreciates what they've offered. But with that realization comes a growing weight in his chest, the knowledge that every moment of happiness he finds here is built on a lie, and that lies, no matter how well-intentioned, have a way of growing until they consume everything around them. The morning arrives with a symphony of roosters and the soft lowing of cattle from neighboring farms, sounds that initially jolted Jae-hyun from sleep, but now serve as a gentler alarm than any smartphone. He's been in Damyang for 2 weeks, and his body is beginning to adapt to rhythms older than electricity, rising with the sun, sleeping when darkness falls naturally, rather than when the last email is answered. Today, Haiwan has invited him to help with the morning harvest, and he arrives at the farm before 7, the grass still heavy with dew that soaks through his canvas shoes. She's already among the trees, a wicker basket slung over her arm, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who's done this task countless times. "Perfect timing," she calls out, her voice carrying easily through the still morning air. "The early ones are just ready." She demonstrates the proper technique, how to cup the peach gently, feeling for the subtle give that indicates perfect ripeness, how to twist it slightly so it releases from the branch without tearing. Her hands move with unconscious skill, selecting fruit with an accuracy that seems almost mystical to his inexperienced eyes. "Your turn," she says, offering him a basket. Remember, if you have to pull hard, it's not ready. His first attempts are clumsy, his city-soft hands uncertain on the delicate fruit. He grips too tightly and leaves thumbprints in the tender skin, or doesn't grip firmly enough and watches peaches tumble to the ground. Haewon watches with patient amusement, occasionally reaching over to guide his movements without making him feel incompetent. "Like this," she murmurs, her hand covering his as she demonstrates the proper pressure. The contact sends warmth shooting up his arm, and he has to force himself to concentrate on the lesson rather than the way her fingers feel against his skin. Gradually, he develops a rhythm. The work is meditative in a way he never expected. The repetitive motion, the need to focus completely on each individual fruit, the satisfaction of a basket slowly filling with perfect specimens. His back aches from reaching and stretching. His arms burn from holding them above his head. But it's a clean, honest exhaustion, unlike the soul-deep fatigue of corporate stress. "You're getting it," Haewon says approvingly after an hour, examining his harvest. "These are beautiful." The praise hits him harder than any board commendation ever has. In Seoul, his success was measured in abstractions: profit margins, market share, stock prices. Here, surrounded by tangible results of his labor, praised for work that will literally feed people, he feels a satisfaction that goes deeper than ego. "It's harder than it looks," he admits, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. "Everything worthwhile is," she replies simply. "But look at what you've accomplished." His basket is full of peaches that glow like small suns in the morning light, each one selected by his own hands, each one a tiny masterpiece of nature that he helped bring to harvest. For a man accustomed to commanding armies of employees, there's something profoundly moving about this direct connection between effort and result. They work side by side for another hour, their conversation flowing as easily as the labor. She tells him about the seasons on the farm: spring's anxious watching for late frosts that could destroy the bloom, summer's intensive cultivation and harvest, autumn's preparation for winter, the quiet months when the trees rest and plans are made for the coming year. "It sounds like it never stopped," he observes, carrying a full basket toward the storage shed where Mr. Kang is preparing crates for transport to market. "It doesn't," she agrees, "but that's part of what I love about it. There's always something to tend, something growing, something changing. In the city, I imagine people get bored with the same office, the same routine every day. If only she knew how crushingly repetitive his corporate life has become. The same meetings with different faces, the same strategies applied to different markets, the same victory celebrations that taste increasingly hollow. Here on the farm, even repetitive tasks feel fresh because they're connected to something alive and growing." "Good work." Mr. Kang nods approvingly as they deliver their harvest. "You've got the hands for it now." The comment fills Jae-hyun with ridiculous pride. His hands, soft and manicured when he arrived, now show the beginnings of honest calluses. The palms that once knew only the smooth surfaces of steering wheels and conference tables are learning the texture of bark, the weight of earth, the satisfaction of tools used for creation rather than calculation. After the morning's labor, Mrs. Kang insists he stay for lunch, and they eat in the shade of an ancient persimmon tree, sharing dishes that taste somehow more delicious after hours of physical work. The rice seems sweeter, the kimchi more perfectly balanced, the grilled mackerel more satisfying than any business lunch he's ever endured. "You're different from most city people," Mrs. Kang observes, refilling his water cup. "Usually they come here expecting it to be like a theme park, all the pretty parts without understanding the work that makes it possible." Jae-hyun feels heat rise in his cheeks. If she only knew how accurately she'd described his initial expectations, seeing rural life as a temporary diversion, an interesting experience to add to his understanding of the business. But somewhere between that first morning harvest and this moment, sitting under the persimmon tree with calluses forming on his palms, everything has changed. I'm learning that the work is the best part, he says honestly. There's something about seeing direct results from your effort that I never found in office work. That's because office work is just pushing papers around, Mr. Kang says with the gentle authority of a man who's never doubted his own purpose. This is feeding people, making things grow, participating in the cycle that keeps the world turning. After lunch, Haiwan offers to show him the vegetable garden where her mother grows the ingredients for their meals. They walk through neat rows of cabbage and radishes, past trellises heavy with climbing beans, around plots where peppers and herbs create a patchwork of different greens. Mama taught me that every plant has its own personality, she explains, kneeling to examine tomato plants for signs of pests or disease. Some are strong and independent, some need more attention, some grow best when they're planted near certain companions. The metaphor isn't lost on him. Watching her tend to each plant with individualized care, he thinks about his own management style. The broad brushstrokes, the efficiency metrics that treat employees as interchangeable units rather than unique individuals with their own needs and potential. Like people, he says. Exactly like people. She looks up at him with a smile that seems to see something good in his understanding. The best gardeners are the ones who take time to learn each plant's language. As the afternoon progresses, he finds himself drawn into the rhythms of farm life in ways that surprise him. He helps Mrs. Kang harvest vegetables for dinner, learning to select the perfect cucumber to identify which lettuce leaves are at their peak. He assists Mr. Kang with repairing a section of fence, discovering muscles he'd forgotten he possessed as they dig post holes and stretch wire. Every task requires presence, attention, a willingness to work with natural processes rather than trying to dominate them. It's the opposite of everything his corporate training taught him about imposing will through superior strategy and resource allocation. The sun is beginning its descent when they finally pause, sharing cold barley tea on the porch while watching shadows lengthen across the orchard. Jae-hyun's shirt is damp with honest sweat. His hands are dirty despite multiple washings, and he feels more centered than he has in years. You'll sleep well tonight, Haewon predicts, settling into the wooden chair beside him. There's something about working with your hands that quiets the mind. She's right, though he doesn't fully understand why. In Seoul, his mind races constantly, analyzing deals, anticipating problems, strategizing responses to competitive threats. But here, focused on immediate tangible tasks, that mental chatter has quieted to a peaceful hum. Thank you, he says, meaning it more deeply than she could possibly understand. For today, for showing me all of this. Thank you for helping, she replies. And for understanding. Not everyone sees the beauty in this kind of life. Looking at her in the golden evening light, her hair escaping from its practical ponytail, her face glowing with the satisfaction of a day well spent, he sees beauty that makes his chest ache with yearning. Not just physical beauty, though she's more lovely than any woman he's known, but the beauty of a life lived in harmony with something larger than individual ambition. As he drives back to town, his hands still tingling with the memory of bark and earth and growing things, Jae-hyun realizes he's crossed another line in his deception. It's no longer just about understanding rural operations or enjoying a temporary escape from corporate pressure. He's falling in love with the farm, with this way of life, and most dangerously of all, with the woman who embodies everything his real world has taught him to dismiss as simple and naive. The question that keeps him awake that night, despite his physical exhaustion, is what will happen when she discovers that everything she believes about him is a lie. The autumn festival arrives in Damyang like a beloved family celebration, transforming the town square into a canvas of red and gold decorations that mirror the changing leaves on the surrounding mountains. Paper lanterns hang from every available post and wire, casting warm pools of light as evening approaches. The air carries the competing fragrances of street food vendors, hot choc sizzling with sweet filling, bunjeopang shaped like fish and stuffed with red bean paste, and the rich aroma of Korean corn roasting over open flames. Jaehyun has been in town for nearly a month now, and the festival represents both a milestone and a danger. As Lee Jun-ho, he's become a familiar face in the community, but events like these have a way of revealing truths that careful daily routines can conceal. Tonight, surrounded by the entire town in celebration, maintaining his facade will require every ounce of his considerable acting ability. Jun-ho! Haewon's voice cuts through the crowd, and he turns to see her approaching with her friend Shin Bo-ra in tow. She's dressed for the festival in a simple but elegant hanbok in soft peach and cream colors that complement her natural coloring perfectly. Her hair is arranged in a traditional style with delicate ornaments that catch the lantern light, and the sight of her literally stops his breath. "You look," he begins, then finds himself wordless. Beautiful seems inadequate, stunning too theatrical. She looks like everything good about Korean tradition given human form, like the embodiment of grace and warmth that makes his chest ache with longing. "Thank you," she says, a blush coloring her cheeks. Mama insisted on the hanbok. She says festivals are for honoring the past even as we celebrate the present. Bora studies him with the sharp interest of a protective friend evaluating a potential threat to her best friend's happiness. She's dressed in a modern interpretation of traditional clothing, a shortened hanbok top over dark jeans and boots, her short hair styled in soft waves that frame her face. There's intelligence in her eyes and a guardedness that suggests she's not as easily charmed as Haewon. "So you're the mysterious accountant from Seoul," she says, extending her hand with a grip that's firmer than necessary. "Haewon talks about you constantly." "Bo-ra," Haewon protests, but her embarrassment only makes her more endearing. "All good things, I hope," Jaehyun replies, accepting the social challenge with a smile that's genuine despite his nervousness. He likes that Haewon has someone looking out for her interests, even if that someone clearly considers him a potentially dangerous outsider. The evening unfolds like a fairy tale. They move through the festival together, sharing street food that tastes better when eaten standing up under lantern light than any five-star restaurant meal he's ever experienced. Haewon insists on buying him hotteok from her favorite vendor, laughing when the hot sugar filling burns his tongue and he has to fan his mouth with his hand. "City boy," Bora teases, but there's warmth beneath the mockery now. "You have to let it cool first." "Nobody tells you these things," he protests, making both women laugh. The sound creates a bubble of happiness around their small group that seems to glow brighter than the festival lights. They watch traditional performances on the main stage, folk dancers whose movements tell stories of harvest and gratitude, drummers whose rhythms seem to pulse in harmony with the heartbeat of the earth itself. Jaehyun finds himself moved by the connection between past and present, the way ancient traditions continue to give meaning to contemporary life. "My grandmother used to dance like that," Haewon says softly, during a particularly graceful performance. "She tried to teach me, but I was too impatient as a child. I wish I'd paid more attention." "It's never too late to learn," he suggests, though he knows that for him, it might be exactly too late. His time in this borrowed life is running out, and every moment of happiness feels stolen from a future that can't possibly include her. The highlight of the evening comes when the announcer calls for the traditional harvest dance, inviting everyone to join in the simple, repetitive movements that celebrate the completion of another successful growing season. Haiwan grabs his hand without hesitation, pulling him into the circle that's forming in the town square. I don't know how, he protests, but she's already teaching him the basic steps. A sidestep, a clap, a turn, a bow to your partner. The movements are simple enough that even his clumsy city feet can master them. But the real magic is in the communal energy, the way individual dancers become part of something larger than themselves. Dancing with Haiwan under the stars, surrounded by families who've celebrated the same festival for generations, Jae-hyun experiences something he's never felt before, the profound peace of belonging. Not the temporary belonging that money can buy, exclusive clubs, luxury resorts, first-class compartments, but the deep, soul-level belonging that comes from being accepted for who you are rather than what you own. Except, of course, they don't know who he really is. The thought creates a shadow across his happiness that grows darker as the evening progresses. During a lull in the festivities, Bora approaches him while Haiwan is helping her mother at the Kang family's festival booth, selling small jars of homemade peach preserves and dried fruit. She likes you, Bora says without preamble, her tone serious despite the cheerful chaos around them. I like her too, he replies carefully. That's obvious. She studies his face in the lantern light, and he has the uncomfortable feeling that she sees more than he'd like. The question is what your intentions are. Haiwan has never been involved with anyone seriously. She's innocent in ways that city people sometimes find amusing until they get bored and move on. The accusation hits harder because it's not entirely unfair. How many times in his corporate life has he been amused by people he considered naive, right up until their usefulness to him expired? The difference is that Haiwan has never been useful to him in any conventional sense. She's never offered him anything but kindness, shared meals, honest work, and the gift of her presence. I would never hurt her, he says, meaning it completely, while knowing that his very existence in her life is a potential devastation waiting to unfold. Maybe not intentionally, Bora concedes. But sometimes the worst damage comes from people who never meant any harm. People who get caught up in their own stories and forget that other people have real hearts that can be broken. Before he can respond, Haiwan returns carrying a small jar of preserves that she presses into his hands. A gift, she says, so you can have a taste of our orchard even when you're back in Seoul. The jar is warm from her hands, labeled in her careful handwriting, Kang family peach preserves made with love. The simple gift hits him like a physical blow. She's already thinking about his eventual departure, already trying to give him something to remember her by, and she's doing it with such generous heart that he feels like the lowest form of deception made flesh. Thank you, he manages, his voice rougher than he intends. This is perfect. The evening winds down with a spectacular fireworks display that paints the night sky in cascades of gold and silver. Families spread blankets on the grass to watch, children fall asleep in their parents' arms, and couples hold hands under the starlight. Jae-hyun sits beside Haiwan on her family's blanket, hyper-aware of the space between them, wanting desperately to close it, but knowing he has no right. When a particularly beautiful burst of golden light illuminates the sky, she turns to him with wonder shining in her eyes. Isn't it magical? Yes, he agrees, but he's looking at her face rather than the fireworks. The real magic is sitting right beside him, and he's going to lose it because he built their entire relationship on a foundation of lies. As they walk back through the emptying festival grounds, Haiwan slips her hand into his with such natural ease that it feels like coming home. Her fingers are small and work-roughened, warm despite the cooling night air, and they fit against his palm as if they were designed to be there. Thank you for sharing this with me. he says as they pause outside the hardware store where his apartment waits in the darkness above. Tonight was special, she finishes softly. I'm glad you were here for it. Festivals are better when you have someone to share them with. She rises on her toes to kiss his cheek, a gentle touch that burns against his skin like a brand. Sweet dreams, Junho. He watches her walk away with Bo-Ra, their voices carrying soft laughter back to him on the night breeze. In his pocket, the jar of preserves seems to weigh 1,000 pounds, a tangible reminder of everything he's gained through deception and everything he stands to lose when the truth inevitably comes to light. Back in his Spartan apartment, he sits by the window looking out at the mountains that ring the valley, turning the small jar over in his hands. The label bears not just her handwriting but tiny decorative touches, small drawings of peach blossoms, a smiley face dotting the I in her name. It's the work of someone who puts love into the smallest details, who believes that even a simple gift should carry beauty and joy. The Yoon Jae-hyun who arrived in this town would have seen such touches as charmingly quaint, the rural equivalent of corporate gift wrapping. But the man he's become through knowing her recognizes them for what they truly are, evidence of a heart that gives freely, that finds joy in bringing happiness to others, that deserves so much better than the elaborate lie he's constructed around himself. For the first time since this deception began, he seriously considers telling her the truth. Not because his conscience demands it, though it does, but because she deserves the chance to make an informed choice about whether someone like him could ever be worthy of someone like her. The question that keeps him awake until dawn is whether he'll have the courage to risk everything for honesty, or whether his cowardice will doom them both to the inevitable devastation that lies ahead. The November sky over Damyang hangs heavy and gray, pregnant with the kind of storm that arrives with winter's first serious intention. Jae-hyun feels the change in the air as he walks toward the farm, his collar turned up against the wind that carries the scent of coming rain and dying leaves. He's been in town for 6 weeks now, and each day has woven him deeper into a life that feels more real than anything he's ever experienced. Today, however, reality has other plans. His phone has been buzzing incessantly since dawn, missed calls from his secretary, from board members, from his father's office. Each ignored ring feels like a reprieve and a countdown simultaneously. The corporate world he left behind is beginning to notice his absence, to question the extended nature of his rural audit, and the walls he's built around his borrowed life are showing hairline cracks that threaten to bring everything crashing down. Haewon greets him at the farm gate with her usual radiant smile, but there's something different in her eyes today. A softness, a vulnerability that makes his chest tighten with emotions he's not prepared to name. She's wearing a cream-colored sweater that brings out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, and her hair falls loose around her shoulders in waves that catch the pre-storm light. Perfect timing, she says, though her definition of perfect clearly differs from the meteorologists. The first fat raindrops are already beginning to fall, creating dark spots on the dusty path between them. I wanted to show you the winter greenhouse before the weather gets too bad. They hurry across the farmyard as the scattered drops become a steady patter, then break into a run as the sky opens with the sudden intensity of autumn storms in mountainous regions. Breathless and laughing, they tumble through the greenhouse door just as the deluge begins in earnest, turning the world outside into a watercolor painting viewed through streaming glass. The greenhouse is warm and humid, filled with the green scent of growing things and the soft sound of rain drumming on the metal roof. Rows of lettuce and spinach create neat lines of vibrant color, while herbs climbing up wooden stakes fill the air with competing fragrances: basil and mint, oregano and rosemary. It's a pocket of summer preserved against winter's approach, and standing there with water dripping from their hair, Jae-hyun feels like they've entered a secret world meant only for them. Mama's pride and joy. Haiwan says, pushing damp strands back from her face. She can grow fresh vegetables all winter long in here. Says it's like keeping a little piece of spring alive when everything else goes to sleep. They walk between the growing tables, her hand occasionally brushing against his as she points out different varieties, explains the rotation schedule, describes her mother's careful attention to temperature and humidity. The simple intimacy of shared space, of being alone together while the storm rages outside, creates an atmosphere charged with more than the electrical energy of the passing weather system. Jun-ho, she says suddenly, stopping beside a trellis heavy with cherry tomatoes. Her voice carries a note he's never heard before, hesitant, hopeful, vulnerable in a way that makes him want to gather her in his arms and protect her from anything that might cause her doubt or fear. Yes? She turns to face him fully, and he sees that her cheeks are flushed with something that has nothing to do with their run through the rain. I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about it for days, and I can't keep it inside anymore. His heart hammers against his ribs with the mixture of anticipation and dread. If she's about to say what he hopes and fears, she might say, then the foundation of lies beneath their relationship is about to become even more treacherous. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hang in the humid air between them like soap bubbles, beautiful and fragile and capable of devastating him completely. She's looking at him with such open honesty, such brave vulnerability, that he feels something tear apart inside his chest. This is the moment he's been both longing for and dreading, the moment when her heart becomes fully invested in a version of him that doesn't exist. "Hey, One," he breathes, his voice rough with emotions he can't begin to untangle. "I know you'll have to go back to Seoul eventually," she continues quickly, as if afraid that silence will steal her courage. "I know I'm just a simple farm girl, and you're used to sophisticated city life. But these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life, and I had to tell you how I feel, even if..." He silences her with a kiss that tastes like rain and desperation and all the words he can't say. She melts against him with a soft sigh that nearly destroys what remains of his self-control, her arms coming up to circle his neck, as if she's been waiting her entire life for this moment. The greenhouse around them disappears, the storm outside becomes background music, and for a few perfect heartbeats nothing exists except the two of them, and the love that's been growing between them, like the most delicate of plants. When they finally break apart, both breathing hard, her eyes are bright with tears of joy and relief. "I was so afraid you'd say it was too complicated or that I was being foolish." "You could never be foolish," he says fiercely, framing her face with hands that shake slightly. "You're the most real, most beautiful person I've ever known." It's true. Every word. And that's what makes this moment both perfect and completely devastating. She is falling in love with him, and he's been in love with her since that first day in the rain when she gathered scattered peaches with such determined grace. But she's in love with Lee Jun-ho, the humble accountant who shares her simple values and quiet dreams. She has no idea that she's kissing Yoon Jae-hyun, heir to an empire, a man whose real life is built on everything she's never wanted and would never understand. They spend the afternoon in the greenhouse talking quietly while the storm continues its assault on the roof above them. She tells him about her dreams for the farm, expanding the organic vegetable operation, maybe starting a small farmers market cooperative with neighboring families. He listens with the part of his heart that loves her desperately, while the rational part of his mind calculates how easily he could fund all her dreams with what amounts to pocket money from his corporate accounts. The contrast is excruciating. As Lee Jun-ho, he can offer her only his labor, his companionship, and a love built on deception. As Yoon Jae-hyun, he could give her everything she's ever dreamed of and more, but she would never want it if she knew the truth about who he really is. As evening approaches and the rain finally begins to ease, His phone buzzes with yet another call from Seoul. This time, the caller ID shows his father's personal number, and he knows that ignoring it is no longer an option. "I should take this," he says reluctantly, stepping toward the greenhouse door for privacy. But Haewon is closer to the phone than he is, and her curious glance at the screen turns to confusion, then to something that looks like the beginning of understanding and fear. "Who is Yoon Sang-min?" she asks quietly. "And why is he calling you?" The world stops. The rain on the greenhouse roof becomes deafening silence. The warm air turns arctic, and Jae-hyun watches everything he's built crumble in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Her eyes search his face, looking for an explanation that won't destroy everything between them. But he can see in her expression that she already knows. Somehow, she already knows. "Haewon, I can explain," he starts. But the phone continues its insistent buzzing, and the name on the screen glows like an accusation in the gathering darkness. That's the chairman of Yoon Industries," she whispers, her face going pale. "Why would the chairman of one of Korea's biggest companies be calling an accountant from a rural office?" The question hangs between them like a blade, and Jae-hyun realizes that this moment, this exact moment, is when everything changes forever. He can see in her eyes the exact instant when the pieces click into place, when Lee Jun-ho, the humble accountant, dissolves like mist and reveals Yoon Jae-hyun underneath. "You're not who you said you were," she breathes, taking a step back from him. The movement feels like a physical blow, the first retreat in what he knows will become a full withdrawal. You're him, aren't you? You're Yoon Jae-hyun." The words fall between them like stones into still water, sending ripples of devastation spreading outward until they touch every moment they've shared, contaminating each memory with the poison of deception. Jae-hyun watches Haewon's face cycle through confusion, realization, hurt, and finally, worst of all, a growing coldness that mirrors the storm outside. "Tell me I'm wrong," she whispers, but her voice already carries the knowledge that she's not. "Tell me you're not the heir to Yoon Industries. Tell me Lee Jun-ho is real and this is all some terrible misunderstanding." He opens his mouth to lie again. God help him. His first instinct is still to protect the beautiful fiction they've built together. But looking into her eyes, seeing the dawning horror of complete betrayal, he finds he can't add another deception to the mountain he's already built. "I can't tell you that," he says quietly, and watches her heart break in real time. The phone finally stops buzzing, but the silence it leaves behind is worse than the intrusion. In that silence, everything they've shared replays with new, devastating context. Every moment of supposed understanding, every shared laugh, every gentle touch, all of it built on the foundation of his elaborate lie. 6 weeks, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 weeks of my life, of my family's hospitality, of my... Her voice cracks on the word she can't say aloud. Love. 6 weeks of thinking I'd found someone who understood me, who valued what we have here. "I do understand," he says desperately, reaching toward her, but she flinches away as if his touch would burn her. "I do value it. Everything I felt, everything we shared, that was real." "Real?" The word erupts from her with bitter laughter. "Nothing about you is real. Your name, your job, your reason for being here, what else? Did you laugh about us behind our backs? Did you find it amusing, the way the simple farm girl fell for the sophisticated city heir playing at being ordinary?" "Never." The word tears from his throat with such force that she actually steps back, startled by his vehemence. "I have never, not once, laughed about you or your family. What you showed me here, the way you welcomed me, it saved me. You saved me." "Saved you from what?" she demands, and now anger is bleeding into her voice, hot and bright and more devastating than her tears. From your comfortable life? Your successful business? Your family fortune? Poor you. How difficult it must have been to slum it with us peasants for a few weeks. That's not how it was, he pleads. But he can see that his words are falling on ears deafened by betrayal. I came here because I was drowning in that life. I was suffocating in meetings and spreadsheets and people who only told me what they thought I wanted to hear. I needed something real. So you decided to steal it from us? The accusation hits like a physical blow. You took our real lives, our genuine feelings, our trust, and you used them as… what? Therapy? A vacation from your real responsibilities? The phone buzzes again, and this time she snatches it before he can react, answering with a cold formality that makes his blood freeze. Yoon Jae-hyun's phone. May I ask who's calling? Even from a distance, Jae-hyun can hear his father's sharp intake of breath, the pause before Chairman Yoon's carefully controlled voice responds. I'm looking for my son. Is he available? Haewon's eyes find his across the small space of the greenhouse, and in them he sees not just hurt and anger, but a crushing disappointment that goes deeper than romantic betrayal. She's realizing that every assumption she made about his character, every moment when she thought she was seeing his true self, was built on careful deception. He's here, she says into the phone, her voice steady, despite the tears now streaming down her cheeks. But I think you should know, he's been pretending to be someone named Lee Jun-ho for the past 6 weeks, living in our town, working on our farm, lying to people who showed him nothing but kindness. She holds out the phone to him and her hand doesn't shake despite everything that's crumbling around them. Your father wants to speak with you, your real father, about your real life. Taking the phone feels like accepting a death sentence. His father's voice, when it comes through the speaker, carries decades of authority and barely controlled fury. Jae-hyun, I've been trying to reach you for days. The board is in chaos, the shareholders are asking questions, and I've been making excuses for behavior that I'm beginning to think is inexcusable. Father, I can explain. You will explain. To me, in person, tomorrow. A car is already en route to bring you back to Seoul. This, whatever this has been, it ends now. The line goes dead, and in the silence that follows, Jae-hyun realizes that his father's ultimatum is the least of his problems. Haewon is looking at him with the expression of someone who's watching a stranger emerge from the shell of someone she thought she knew. A car is coming, she says, and her voice sounds hollow, drained of all emotion. Of course a car is coming, because that's who you really are, someone who has cars sent to fetch him when he's done playing pretend. Haewon, please. No. She holds up a hand, and for the first time since he's known her, she looks truly angry. Not the gentle frustration he's seen when plants don't grow as expected or when weather threatens the harvest, but deep, burning anger that transforms her face into something fierce and unfamiliar. You don't get to please me. You don't get to ask for understanding or forgiveness or anything else from me. She moves toward the greenhouse door, then pauses with her hand on the handle. My family invited you into our home. My mother cooked for you. My father taught you to work with your hands. Her voice breaks completely on the word, and she has to take several breaths before she can continue. I showed you parts of myself that I've never shared with anyone. I trusted you with my heart. The accusation in those last words is devastating, because it's completely true. She did trust him with her heart, and he accepted that trust while knowing that everything she believed about him was a lie. That trust, that love, it was real, he insists. But even as he says it, he knows how hollow the words must sound to her. Was it? She challenges, turning back to face him fully. Because the man I fell in love with was someone who understood what it meant to work for everything you have. Someone who valued simple things over complicated ones. Someone who was honest and humble and genuine. But that man doesn't exist, does he? He was just a role you were playing. That man is who I want to be, he says desperately. These weeks with you, this life, it's shown me who I could become. But it's not who you are. Her voice is steady now, resolved in a way that terrifies him more than anger or tears. Who you are is someone who lies without hesitation. Someone who uses other people's genuine feelings as entertainment. Someone who thinks he can take what he wants from regular people and then go back to his real life when he gets bored. I never thought of it that way. Because you never had to think about it at all. She opens the greenhouse door and the sound of rain fills the space between them. You have the luxury of choice. You can be Lee Jun-ho when it's fun and convenient, and Yoon Jae-hyun when reality calls. But I don't have that luxury. I only have one life, one heart, one chance to trust someone with both. And you've destroyed that. She steps out into the rain without another word, leaving him standing alone among the growing plants that suddenly feel like a mockery of everything natural and healthy in the world. Through the rain-streaked glass, he watches her run toward the house, her shoulders shaking with sobs that the storm helps to conceal. The greenhouse that felt like paradise an hour ago now feels like a prison, filled with the ghosts of words that can't be taken back and trust that can't be rebuilt. Jae-hyun sinks into a chair among the tomato plants and stares at his phone, still clutched in his hand like evidence of his crimes. In the distance, he can see lights coming on in the farmhouse windows, and he knows that right now, Haewon is telling her parents everything. The same parents who welcomed him with such generous hearts, who treated him like a son, who shared their meals and their wisdom and their unconditional acceptance. The irony is crushing. In trying to find something real in his artificial life, he's destroyed the most real thing he's ever encountered. The love that grew between him and Haewon was built on lies, but it was genuine love nonetheless. The kind of deep, transformative connection he searched for his entire adult life without knowing what he was seeking. And now it's gone, killed by the very deception that made it possible in the first place. The rain continues to fall, washing the world clean while he sits in the ruins of everything that mattered, waiting for his father's car to arrive and carry him back to a life that will never feel like living again. The black sedan arrives at dawn like a funeral procession. Its sleek lines and tinted windows as out of place in rural Damyang as a spaceship would be. Jae-hyun watches from his apartment window as it navigates the narrow streets, disturbing the peaceful morning rhythm of a town that rises with the sun and moves at nature's pace. The driver, one of his father's most trusted employees, parks directly in front of the hardware store with an efficiency that speaks of corporate precision. Jae-hyun has spent the night packing his few belongings and wrestling with the growing certainty that leaving now will be the final destruction of any chance he might have had with Haewon. But staying would only prolong the agony for both of them. And besides, his father's summons wasn't a request. It was a command from the man who controls his trust fund, his position in the company, and ultimately, his future. The irony isn't lost on him that after 6 weeks of tasting freedom, he's walking straight back into the golden cage of his birthright. As he loads his suitcase into the sedan's trunk, he catches sight of movement at the Kang family's market stall. Haewon is there with her mother, arranging the morning's produce with the same careful attention she's always shown. But even from a distance, he can see the difference in her posture, the way she holds herself more rigidly, the absence of the easy smile that usually lights her face when she works. Mrs. Kang notices the car and says something to her daughter. Haewon's eyes find his across the market square, and the look that passes between them is devastating in its finality. There's no anger left in her expression, no hurt, just an exhausted sadness that somehow feels worse than fury. She turns back to her work without acknowledgement, and Jae-hyun understands that this is his dismissal. Not dramatic, not cruel, but complete. In Haiwan's world, when trust is broken, there are no second chances, no elaborate redemption arcs. There is only the quiet dignity of moving forward without looking back. The drive to Seoul passes in silence, broken only by his father's driver occasionally taking calls from corporate headquarters. Through the windows, Jae-hyun watches the countryside give way to suburbs, then to the urban sprawl that defines modern Korea. With each kilometer, the air grows thicker, the sky grayer, the world more artificial. By the time they reach the city center, with its glass towers and endless traffic, he feels like he's suffocating. The Yoon Industries headquarters building rises 43 stories above the Han River, its facade of steel and glass reflecting the gray November sky like a mirror of corporate ambition. Jae-hyun hasn't seen it in 6 weeks, but walking through the marble lobby feels like returning to a mausoleum. Beautiful, expensive, and utterly lifeless. His father's office occupies the entire top floor, with panoramic windows that offer a god's-eye view of the city below. Chairman Yoon Sang-min sits behind his massive mahogany desk like an emperor holding court, his perfectly tailored suit and steel gray hair projecting the kind of authority that has built an empire from nothing. "Sit," he commands, without looking up from the financial reports spread across his desk. Jae-hyun takes the chair across from his father, feeling like a schoolboy called to account for his misdeeds. The office around them displays the fruits of 3 decades of corporate warfare. Awards, photographs with presidents and prime ministers, artwork that costs more than most people earn in a lifetime. It's impressive and intimidating, and completely empty of anything resembling warmth or humanity. 6 weeks, his father finally says, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent commanding boardrooms. 6 weeks of corporate paralysis while the heir to this empire played farmer in some forgotten village. You needed nothing. The words crack like a whip. What you did was abandon your responsibilities to indulge in some middle-aged fantasy about finding yourself. Do you have any idea what your absence has cost us? The deals that have stalled while partners wondered about your mental stability? The confidence we've lost with shareholders who question the succession plan? Jae-hyun stares at his hands that 6 weeks ago were soft and manicured, and now show the beginnings of calluses that mark them as capable of real work. The contrast between those calluses and the marble and steel office around him feels like a metaphor for everything that's wrong with his life. The board has voted, his father continues relentlessly. You will resume your duties immediately, with the understanding that any further episode will result in a formal review of your position in the company. The shareholders need stability, confidence in leadership. They need to see that you understand your obligations. And if I refuse? The question surprises them both. Jae-hyun hadn't planned to say it, but looking around this sterile monument to ambition, thinking of morning mist over peach orchards, and the taste of fruit picked warm from the tree, the words emerge with their own momentum. His father's eyebrows rise slightly, the only display of emotion his corporate mask allows. Refuse? You would walk away from everything your grandfather built? Everything I've spent my life expanding? For what? A piece of farmland and some girl who probably can't even spell diversified portfolio? The dismissive tone ignites something in Jae-hyun's chest. Not anger exactly, but a fierce protectiveness for the life and the woman his father is mocking. Her name is Kang Haiwan, and she's worth more than this entire building. She understands things you've never learned. How to find joy in simple work. How to build relationships based on trust instead of transactions. How to live with integrity. Integrity? His father's laugh is cold as winter wind. You lecture me about integrity while confessing that you spent 6 weeks lying to these people about who you are. What kind of integrity builds a relationship on deception? The accusation hits its target with devastating accuracy. Jae-hyun has no defense because his father is absolutely right. Everything he felt for Hye-won, everything they shared together, was contaminated by his fundamental dishonesty about his identity. I made a mistake, he admits quietly. I should have told her the truth from the beginning. The truth? Chairman Yoon leans back in his chair, studying his son with the analytical gaze that has made him legendary in business negotiations. The truth is that you are the heir to one of Korea's most successful companies. The truth is that you have responsibilities to thousands of employees, to shareholders who trusted us with their investments, to a legacy that extends far beyond your personal desires. He stands and walks to the window wall, gesturing toward the city sprawling below them. This is your world, Jae-hyun. Not some rural village where people grow vegetables for pocket change. Your decisions affect markets, influence government policy, create or destroy jobs for entire industries. That's the weight you were born to carry. What if I don't want to carry it? The second rebellious question hangs in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Outside the windows, Seoul continues its relentless pace. Millions of people pursuing success, wealth, status, all the things that used to matter to him before he learned what peach blossoms smell like in the morning mist. Then you're not the man I raised, his father says finally, and there's something almost like sadness in his voice. But more importantly, you're not the man this company needs. The board has authorized me to offer you a choice. Resume your position with full commitment and no further detours, or accept a generous severance package and relinquish all claims to company leadership. The ultimatum settles between them with the finality of a legal contract. Jae-hyun realizes that this moment has been coming for years. The inevitable collision between his birthright and his desires, between duty and happiness, between the life he's expected to live and the life he's discovered he wants. How long do I have to decide? The board meets again Monday morning. Today is Thursday. His father returns to his desk, already shifting his attention back to the endless stream of reports and analyses that define his existence. I suggest you use the time wisely. The weekend passes in a haze of contradictions that leave Jae-hyun feeling like he's drowning in his own life. His penthouse apartment, which once represented the pinnacle of success and sophisticated living, now feels like an expensive prison. The floor-to-ceiling windows that offer spectacular views of Seoul's skyline serve only to remind him of how far removed he is from the mountains and valleys where real life happens. He tries to slip back into his old routines, expensive dinners at restaurants where the waiters know his preferences, visits to exclusive clubs where his membership card opens doors to privilege and exclusivity. But everything tastes flat, feels hollow, reminds him of what he's lost. The friends who welcomed his return with champagne and curiosity about his rural adventure seem like actors playing roles in a play he no longer wants to participate in. On Friday evening, sitting alone in his study surrounded by financial statements and market analyses, he finds himself staring at the jar of peach preserves Hye-won gave him at the festival. The handwritten label, with its careful characters and small decorative touches, seems to mock him from its place on his mahogany desk. The woman who made this with her own hands, who put love into every detail, will never forgive him for the lies that made their relationship possible. His phone buzzes with text messages from corporate colleagues welcoming him back, from board members expressing satisfaction that the succession crisis has been resolved, from business partners eager to resume negotiations that stalled during his absence. Each notification is a reminder of the world that claims him, the responsibilities that define his worth in everyone else's eyes. But there are no messages from Damyang. No calls from the farm. No indication that the life he lived for 6 weeks ever existed at all. Saturday morning brings an unexpected visitor. Park Min-jae, his closest friend since university, and the one person who might understand the conflict tearing him apart, arrives with coffee and the kind of concerned expression usually reserved for interventions. "You look terrible," Min-jae observes, settling into the leather chair across from Jae-hyun's desk. "Like someone who's lost everything he cares about but doesn't know how to fight to get it back." Perceptive as always. It's a gift. Min-jae studies the jar of preserves, then looks around the apartment that could grace the cover of any luxury lifestyle magazine. "Want to tell me what really happened during your disappearing act? And don't give me the official story about rural operations auditing. I know you too well." The urge to confess everything, the deception, the love, the devastating loss, overwhelms Jae-hyun's carefully maintained composure. For the next hour, he tells Min-jae everything, from his first desperate need to escape the suffocation of corporate life, to the moment Hae-won realized who he really was and what that meant for everything they'd built together. "So you fell in love," Min-jae summarizes when the story ends. "With a woman who believed you were someone else in a life that you pretended to live, based on lies that you never intended to tell. When you put it like that, it sounds even more hopeless. Actually, it sounds like the most human thing you've ever done." Min-jae leans forward, his expression serious despite his usual tendency toward humor. "For as long as I've known you, you've been playing the role of perfect heir, dutiful son, corporate prince, acceptable husband material for appropriate families. But this woman, this farm life, made you want to be someone else entirely. That's not pathetic, Jae-hyun, that's revelation. Revelation built on deception. So fix the deception." The simple suggestion hangs in the air between them like a lifeline Jae-hyun doesn't dare reach for. "She'll never forgive me. You should have seen her face when she realized who I was. I didn't just lie to her. I made her question everything she believed about her own judgment, her ability to see people clearly. Maybe," Min-jae concedes, "or maybe she's sitting in that farmhouse right now wondering if the man she fell in love with exists somewhere underneath all the corporate armor, waiting for a chance to prove himself. The possibility is too dangerous to contemplate." Hope at this point feels like another form of self-torture. "Besides," Min-jae continues, "you're approaching this all wrong. You're thinking like a corporate strategist, analyzing obstacles, calculating odds, trying to engineer outcomes. But love isn't a hostile takeover. It's not about having the perfect plan or controlling all the variables. Sometimes it's about having the courage to show up with nothing but honesty and see what happens." That evening, Jae-hyun stands on his balcony looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline, wrestling with a decision that will determine the rest of his life. In his pocket, his phone carries a prepared resignation letter that would free him from corporate obligations but cost him everything his family has built. On his desk, contracts wait that would cement his commitment to Yoon Industries, but seal him forever in a life that feels like slowly suffocating. The choice should be simple: duty versus desire, stability versus uncertainty, the known versus the unknown. But looking at the city lights that stretch to the horizon, all he can think about is the way starlight looks through the branches of peach trees, and how Hae-won's laughter sounded in the quiet evening air of the farm. His phone buzzes with a text from his secretary, reminding him about Monday morning's board meeting. The corporate world is holding its breath, waiting for his decision, ready to welcome him back into the machinery of success and achievement. But for the first time in his adult life, Jae-hyun finds himself wondering if success might be something entirely different from what he's always been taught. Maybe success isn't about accumulating power or building empires. Maybe it's about finding the courage to live authentically, to love honestly, to build something beautiful even if it's small and simple and completely overlooked by the rest of the world. The jar of peach preserves sits on his kitchen counter like a talisman, and he realizes that it represents more than just a gift from a woman he's lost. It represents a different way of measuring worth, not in quarterly profits or market dominance, but in the sweetness of things grown with patience and tended with love. By Sunday evening, his decision crystallizes with startling clarity. He doesn't want to be the man who chose safety over truth, comfort over courage, inheritance over integrity. He wants to be the man who learned to work with his hands, who understood the value of simple pleasures, who loved a woman enough to risk everything for the chance to deserve her forgiveness. The question now isn't whether to choose love over duty. It's whether he has the strength to fight for both, to find a way to honor his responsibilities while building the life his heart demands. Standing at his apartment window as Seoul settles into another night of endless ambition and calculated dreams, Jae-hyun makes a decision that will either save his soul or destroy his future. He's going back to Damyang. If this drama has touched your heart so far and you're rooting for Jae-hyun and Haewon to find their way back to each other, the best way to support more stories like this is by subscribing and turning on notifications. Their journey isn't over yet. In fact, the most challenging part lies ahead. The Tuesday morning bus to Damyang carries a different passenger than the one who first made this journey 7 weeks ago. Jae-hyun sits in the same seat he occupied on his original escape from Seoul, but everything about him has changed. His clothes are still expensive but deliberately simple. His hands show the permanent reminders of honest work, and his eyes hold a determination that has nothing to do with corporate conquest, and everything to do with the deeper battle for his own soul. The resignation letter he submitted to the board yesterday sits in his briefcase alongside a comprehensive business proposal that could revolutionize rural agricultural development throughout Korea. He's not running away this time. He's running toward something, armed with a plan that he hopes might bridge the gap between his two worlds. The countryside rolls past the bus windows like a homecoming song, each familiar landmark tugging at his heart with memories of the life he discovered and lost. The mountains that ring Damyang Valley emerge from morning mist like old friends welcoming him back, and for the first time in days he feels like he can breathe properly. But as the bus pulls into the town center, reality reasserts itself with uncomfortable clarity. This isn't his home. It's the scene of his greatest deception. These aren't his people. They're the victims of his elaborate lie. And the woman he's come back to win isn't waiting for him with open arms. She's probably hoping never to see him again. The weight of these truths settles on his shoulders as he retrieves his suitcase and stands in the town square where this whole story began. Nothing has changed. The same elderly men play baduk under the ancient trees. The same vendors arrange their goods with careful pride. The same rhythm of rural life continues as if his presence or absence makes no difference at all, which he realizes is probably the most honest assessment of his importance in this place. His first stop is the small inn on the outskirts of town, where he rents a room under his real name this time. The elderly proprietor, Mrs. Choi, recognizes him with confusion that shifts to concern when he explains that he's no longer the accountant from Seoul, but rather someone who owes the community, especially the Kang family, a profound apology. The Kang girl has been different since you left, Mrs. Choi observes with the directness of someone who's watched the town's drama unfold from her front porch. Quieter, sadder. Whatever you did, young man, it cut deep. The confirmation of what he already suspected, that his deception wounded Haewon in ways that extend far beyond simple romantic disappointment, settles in his stomach like a stone. But it also strengthens his resolve. He didn't come back to make himself feel better or to assuage his own guilt. He came back to try, however imperfectly, to repair some of the damage he's caused. That afternoon, he drives his rental car, the same modest sedan he used before, though now it feels like a costume from a play he's no longer performing. to the offices of the County Agricultural Cooperative. His business proposal, refined during sleepless nights in Seoul, and armed with the full weight of his corporate experience, outlines a comprehensive program for sustainable rural development that could transform communities like Damyang without destroying their essential character. The cooperative director, a weathered man named Kim Tae-soo, who spent 4 decades fighting for farmers' rights, listens to Jae-hyun's presentation with skeptical interest that gradually transforms into genuine excitement. This could work, Director Kim admits, studying the financial projections and implementation timelines. But it would require significant initial investment, political support, and most importantly, trust from the farming families themselves. After what happened with the Kang family, I know, Jae-hyun interrupts quietly. I know I destroyed their trust, and probably the trust of everyone else in this community. But the program doesn't depend on me personally. It's designed to be community-controlled, farmer-directed, sustainable without outside interference. Then why are you the one proposing it? The question cuts to the heart of everything. Why is he here? What does he hope to accomplish? What gives him the right to try to fix problems that his deception helped create? Because I learned something here that I can't unlearn, he says finally. I discovered what it means to be part of something bigger than myself, to work toward goals that matter more than personal advancement. I can't undo the lies I told, but maybe I can use what those lies taught me to create something genuinely good. Director Kim studies him for a long moment, the kind of assessment that cuts through corporate polish to examine the character underneath. The Kang family is the most respected in this region, he says finally. If they won't support this program, no one else will either. And right now, I'd say your chances with them are somewhere between slim and impossible. I know. But, Director Kim continues with a slight smile, I've been doing this work long enough to recognize genuine conviction when I see it. You have 1 week to convince them, not to forgive you, necessarily, but to see that this program could help their community. If you can do that, I'll put the full weight of the cooperative behind it. 1 week. 7 days to somehow bridge the gap between betrayal and redemption, between the corporate world he's leaving behind and the rural community he hopes to serve. 7 days to prove that the man Hae-won fell in love with wasn't entirely fictional, that somewhere underneath all the lies was a person capable of growth, honesty, and genuine commitment to something larger than his own desires. As he drives back into town, Jae-hyun passes the market where Hae-won sells her family's produce. Through the windshield, he catches a glimpse of her arranging peaches with the same careful attention he remembers. But her movements are more subdued. Her smile, when it appears for customers, doesn't reach her eyes. The sight of her, so close and yet completely unreachable, reminds him that this isn't really about business proposals or community development programs. This is about a woman whose trust he shattered and whose heart he broke, and whether there's any path back to the person he discovered himself to be when he was with her. The evening finds him sitting in his small inn-room, staring at his phone and the number he's memorized but doesn't have the courage to call. Outside his window, Damyang settles into the peaceful rhythm of rural evening, families gathering for dinner, children's laughter echoing from nearby houses, the soft sounds of a community that knows itself and its place in the world. Tomorrow, he'll begin the most important campaign of his life. Not for market share or corporate dominance, but for the chance to prove that some deceptions, when they lead to genuine transformation, can be forgiven. That some lies, when they reveal deeper truths, can be overcome. That some love, when it's real enough and fought for hard enough, can survive even the worst betrayals. The morning arrives gray and cold, with the kind of penetrating chill that seeps into bones and seems to freeze hope itself. Jae-hyun has been awake since before dawn, rehearsing conversations that will probably never happen, preparing for confrontations that might destroy what little remains of his connection to this place. But delay will only make everything harder, and he's learned enough about himself in recent weeks to know that courage, for him, is something that has to be seized quickly before rational thought can talk him out of it. The Kang family farm looks exactly as it did when he left. The neat rows of dormant peach trees, the orderly vegetable plots prepared for winter, the traditional farmhouse with its weathered wooden beams and clay tile roof. But everything feels different through the lens of his deception revealed. What once seemed like a welcoming sanctuary now feels like the scene of a crime he committed against people who deserved only his honesty. His hands shake as he parks the car and approaches the front gate. Through the kitchen window, he can see movement. Mrs. Kang preparing the morning meal with the same methodical care she's shown for decades. Mr. Kang reading the agricultural news over his first cup of tea. The domestic tranquility of the scene makes his chest ache with longing for belonging he knows he's forfeited. He rings the bell attached to the gatepost and waits, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. Footsteps approach, and the door opens to reveal Mrs. Kang, her kind face cycling through surprise, recognition, and finally settling into a careful neutrality that tells him everything about how completely he's destroyed this family's trust. "Mrs. Kang," he says, bowing deeply with genuine respect and regret. "My name is Yoon Jae-hyun. I know you have no reason to listen to me, but I'm hoping you'll give me a few minutes to try to explain." She studies him for a long moment, and he sees her taking in the changes, the way he holds himself differently, the genuine remorse in his eyes, the absence of the careful performance that characterized Lee Jun-ho. When she finally speaks, her voice carries the weight of maternal disappointment that cuts deeper than anger ever could. "We know who you are now," she says quietly. "The question is whether you know." The challenge in those words, gentle but unmistakable, gives him a fragment of hope. She's not slamming the door in his face. She's not calling for her husband to remove him from the property. She's giving him a chance, however slim, to prove that he's capable of honesty. "May I come in?" he asks. "I have something I'd like to discuss with your family. Something that might help the community regardless of what you decide about me personally." Mrs. Kang hesitates, then steps aside to let him enter. "Hae-won isn't here," she says, and he hears the protective warning in her voice. "She's at the market. Seok-jin is in the back room." The farmhouse kitchen feels smaller than he remembers, more intimate and more exposing. Every surface holds memories of meals shared, conversations about farm life and family traditions, moments when he felt more at home than he ever had in his penthouse apartment. Now those memories feel like evidence of his theft. He stole their hospitality under false pretenses, took their generosity without giving them the chance to decide whether he deserved it. Mr. Kang emerges from the back room, his weathered face showing none of the warmth that once welcomed the young accountant from Seoul. His eyes are hard, assessing, and Jae-hyun realizes he's being evaluated not as a family friend, but as a potential threat to his daughter's well-being. "So," Mr. Kang says, settling into his chair at the kitchen table but not inviting Jae-hyun to sit. The heir to Yoon Industries comes calling. "What does a man like you want from people like us?" The question is fair, direct, and loaded with implications about class, privilege, and the vast gulf between their worlds. Jae-hyun knows that his answer will determine whether this conversation continues or ends before it truly begins. "I want to apologize," he says simply. "And then I want to offer something that might help your community, with no strings attached and no expectation of personal forgiveness." "Apologize for what exactly?" Mrs. Kang asks, and there's steel beneath her gentle tone. "For lying about your name, your job, your reason for being here?" For playing with our daughter's feelings like they were a game? Each accusation hits its mark because each one is completely accurate. Jae-hyun has crafted corporate apologies before, carefully worded statements that acknowledge fault without accepting liability, that express regret while avoiding responsibility. But standing in this kitchen facing these people whose trust he violated, he finds those skills useless. "I apologize for all of that," he says, meeting their eyes directly. "I came here originally to escape from a life that felt empty and meaningless. I never intended to stay long, never planned to get involved with your family, never meant to hurt anyone. But that's not an excuse. It's just context for a series of terrible decisions that hurt people I came to love and respect." "Love, Mr.?" Kang's voice is sharp with skepticism. "You have an interesting definition of love. Most people don't build their relationships on elaborate lies." "You're right." Jae-hyun feels the weight of complete honesty settling on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "What I felt was real, but the foundation was false. I discovered something here, about work that matters, about community, about what it means to be valued for who you are rather than what you own. But I experienced all of that while lying about my identity, which means I stole those experiences from you without giving you the choice to share them freely." Mrs. Kang pours tea with movements that are automatic, but not welcoming. The silence stretches between them, filled with the weight of betrayal and the slim possibility of understanding. "What do you want from us now?" she asks finally. Jae-hyun reaches into his briefcase and removes copies of the development proposal he presented to the agricultural cooperative. The documents are professionally prepared but designed for rural audiences. Clear language, practical timelines, genuine respect for farming expertise and community autonomy. This is a comprehensive rural development program that could benefit every farming family in this region, he explains, spreading the documents on the kitchen table. Sustainable agriculture training, modern equipment cooperatives, direct-to-consumer marketing support, financial assistance that doesn't create dependency. It's designed to strengthen rural communities without changing their essential character. Mr. Kang picks up the documents with obvious skepticism, but as he reads, his expression shifts to interest despite his personal feelings about the presenter. This would require enormous investment. Who's funding it? I am, personally. Not the company, not my family foundation, not any corporate entity. Me, using resources that I've decided are better spent building something worthwhile than accumulating more wealth I don't need. "And what do you get out of it?" Mrs. Kang asks, her maternal instincts clearly suspicious of any deal that seems too good to be true. "The chance to use what I learned here to help communities like this one thrive. The possibility that some good might come from my deception. The hope that someday when your daughter thinks about the man who lied to her, she might also remember that he tried to do something worthwhile with what those lies taught him." The mention of Hae-won brings fresh tension to the room. Mr. Kang sets down the documents and leans back in his chair, studying Jae-hyun with the kind of assessment that fathers make when evaluating potential threats to their children's happiness. "She loved you," he says quietly, and the past tense in that statement is devastating. Not the heir, not the CEO, but the man she thought you were. The question is whether that man actually exists. It's the same question Jae-hyun has been wrestling with since he left Damyang. Whether Lee Jun-ho was a complete fiction or a glimpse of who Yoon Jae-hyun could become. Whether the person who found joy in honest work and simple pleasures was real enough to build a life around. "I don't know," he admits. "I'm trying to find out. But I know that the weeks I spent here pretending to be someone else were the most honest I've ever felt. And I know that what I felt for your daughter, what I still feel, is the most real thing in my life." Before either parent can respond, the sound of a car engine draws their attention to the window. Through the glass, Jae-hyun sees a familiar figure emerging from a vehicle that radiates urban sophistication and corporate power. His heart sinks as he recognizes Choi Min-ho, the corporate rival who represents everything aggressive and calculating about the business world Jae-hyun is trying to leave behind. Min-ho's presence here can only mean trouble for the community, for the Kang family, and for any slim chance Jae-hyun might have had of rebuilding the trust he's destroyed. The storm he thought he was weathering is about to become a hurricane. Choi Min-ho approaches the farmhouse with the predatory confidence of a shark who's smelled blood in the water. Everything about him screams urban superiority. The perfectly tailored coat that probably costs more than most families here earn in a month. The Italian leather shoes completely inappropriate for farm walkways. The expensive watch that catches morning sunlight like a beacon of wealth and privilege. Through the kitchen window, Jae-hyun watches his corporate rival survey the property with calculating eyes that see only opportunity and weakness. Min-ho's smile, visible even from a distance, carries the cruel satisfaction of someone who's about to deliver a killing blow to an enemy who can't fight back. "Friend of yours?" Mr. Kang asks, noting the tension that's transformed Jae-hyun's posture from apologetic to protective. "No," Jae-hyun replies grimly. "He's everything I'm trying not to be anymore." Mrs. Kang moves to answer the door before Min-ho can ring the bell, her instinctive hospitality intact despite her wariness about these sudden invasions of city businessmen. Through the thin walls, they hear the exchange. Min-ho's polished charm, Mrs. Kang's careful politeness, the inevitable invitation to enter that rural manners demand, even when every instinct screams caution. Min-ho enters the kitchen like he's inspecting a property he's considering for purchase, his gaze cataloging every detail with the kind of assessment that turns homes into assets and families into obstacles. When his eyes find Jae-hyun, his smile becomes genuinely predatory. Well, Min-ho says, removing his expensive gloves with theatrical precision. The prodigal heir, playing farmer again. How quaint. Min-ho. Jae-hyun stands, instinctively positioning himself between his rival and the Kang parents. "What are you doing here?" "Research," Min-ho replies smoothly, accepting the tea Mrs. Kang offers with the kind of gracious condescension that makes Jae-hyun's hands clench into fists. "When word reached Seoul that you'd resigned your position to pursue agricultural interests, well, naturally, I became curious about the investment opportunities in this charming region." The threat in those words is unmistakable. Min-ho isn't here by accident. He's here because Jae-hyun's resignation has created opportunities for corporate vultures to circle properties and communities that were previously under Yoon Industries' protection. "The land here isn't for sale," Mr. Kang says firmly. But Jae-hyun hears the uncertainty beneath his words. Rural property owners have learned to be suspicious of city businessmen who arrive unannounced with talk of opportunities and investments. "Everything is for sale," Min-ho replies, with the absolute confidence of someone who's never encountered anything money couldn't buy. "It's just a matter of finding the right price." And from what I understand about the challenges facing small-scale agriculture in Korea, many families here might be more interested in financial security than sentimental attachments to dirt and trees. The casual dismissal of everything the Kang family has built, their heritage, their life's work, their connection to the land, ignites something fierce in Jae-hyun's chest. This is exactly the kind of corporate arrogance he once embodied, the reduction of human meaning to financial calculations. "You're not welcome here," Jae-hyun says, his voice carrying an authority that makes Min-ho's eyebrows rise with surprise. "How interesting," Min-ho muses, settling more comfortably into his chair, as if establishing territorial dominance. "The fallen prince, trying to protect his peasants." "Tell me, Jae-hyun," What exactly do you think you can do to stop legitimate business interests from operating in a free market? I can make sure this community has alternatives. Can you? Minho's laugh carries genuine amusement. With what resources? You've resigned from the company, abandoned your inheritance, cut yourself off from every source of real power you once possessed. You're not a CEO anymore. You're just another unemployed sole expatriate playing at rural lifestyle. The insult is calculated to wound, but it also reveals something important. Minho sees Jae-hyun's transformation as weakness, his commitment to this community as a strategic error that can be exploited. He doesn't understand that walking away from corporate power has actually freed Jae-hyun to fight in ways that boardroom politics never allowed. Maybe, Jae-hyun acknowledges, but I learned something here that you'll never understand. I learned that people who work with their hands, who build things that last, who care about something bigger than quarterly profits, those people have a strength that all the corporate maneuvering in the world can't break. The kitchen door opens suddenly, letting in a gust of cold air along with the one person whose presence will turn this confrontation from business rivalry into something far more personal and devastating. Haewon steps through the doorway carrying a basket of early winter vegetables from the market, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her hair escaping from its practical braid in wisps that catch the morning light. She looks exactly as beautiful as Jae-hyun remembers, but there's something different in her bearing. A guardedness, a careful control that speaks of hard-won wisdom about trusting strangers with expensive smiles. Her eyes find Jae-hyun first, and the pain that flickers across her face before she can mask it hits him like a physical blow. Then her gaze shifts to Minho, and recognition dawns with what looks like resignation. "Mr. Choi," she says politely, setting her basket on the counter with movements that are deliberately calm. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Haewon." Minho rises with theatrical gallantry, his smile transforming into something he probably thinks is charming but comes across as calculating. "You look lovely as always. Rural life certainly agrees with you." Jae-hyun watches this exchange with growing dread, understanding that whatever relationship has developed between Minho and Haewon during his absence in Seoul, it represents another layer of damage his deception has caused. Minho's presence in her life is a direct result of the vacuum his lies created, another way his betrayal has put her in danger. "Have you given any more thought to our conversation last week?" Minho continues, his tone suggesting intimacy that makes Jae-hyun's stomach turn. "About the opportunities I mentioned?" Haewon glances at her parents, then at Jae-hyun, and he sees her wrestling with conflicting loyalties and impossible choices. "I told you I needed time to discuss it with my family." "Of course," Minho agrees with exaggerated understanding. "Such important decisions require careful consideration. Though I should mention that the timeline for my offer is somewhat limited. Market conditions change, and opportunities like this don't remain available indefinitely. The veiled threat is unmistakable. Accept his terms soon or face worse alternatives later." It's exactly the kind of pressure tactic Jae-hyun has seen used countless times in corporate negotiations, but witnessing it deployed against the woman he loves fills him with a rage that threatens his carefully maintained composure. "What kind of opportunity?" Jae-hyun asks, though he suspects he already knows the answer. Minho's smile becomes genuinely predatory now. "I've offered Haewon a position with my company in Seoul. Executive assistant to start, with opportunities for advancement based on performance. Excellent salary, full benefits, housing allowance, everything a bright young woman needs to escape the limitations of rural life." The offer is presented as generosity, but Jae-hyun hears the trap beneath it. Minho isn't offering Haewon a job. He's offering her a form of elegant captivity, a way to remove her from her community and place her under his control. It's corporate acquisition applied to human relationships, and the cruelty of it takes his breath away. And if she's not interested? Jae-hyun asks. Then she's free to remain here, of course, Min-ho replies with false magnanimity. Though I'm afraid the economic pressures on small farms in this region are only going to intensify. Rising costs, climate challenges, market volatility. It's becoming increasingly difficult for operations like this to remain viable without significant capital investment or strategic partnerships. The message is clear. Accept his offer, or watch your family's livelihood slowly strangle under pressures that his company can either alleviate or intensify based on her compliance. Mrs. Kang sets her teacup down with a sharp click that cuts through the tension. I think you've said enough, Mr. Choi. We appreciate your interest in our daughter's future, but family decisions are made by families, not by strangers offering solutions to problems we haven't asked for help with. Her quiet dignity and fierce protectiveness remind Jae-hyun of everything he's learned to admire about this community. Their refusal to be intimidated, their commitment to each other, their understanding that some things matter more than financial advantage. Min-ho's mask slips for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath his practiced charm. Of course, Mrs. Kang, I have the utmost respect for family values. I simply want to ensure that Haewon has options, especially given recent disappointments in her personal life. The reference to Jae-hyun's betrayal is subtle but unmistakable, designed to remind everyone present that the current crisis is his fault, that Min-ho's presence represents a solution to problems created by Jae-hyun's deception. My personal life is my own business, Haewon says firmly. But Jae-hyun hears the tremor beneath her composed surface. Not material for business negotiations. Naturally, Min-ho agrees, though I can't help but notice that certain complications have been resolved. Jae-hyun's resignation from Yoon Industries means he's no longer in a position to make promises about protecting rural communities or funding development programs. The landscape has changed, which creates both challenges and opportunities for forward-thinking families. The final thrust is expertly delivered, reminding everyone that Jae-hyun's grand gestures are meaningless now that he's abandoned the corporate power that could have backed them up. Min-ho has positioned himself as the realistic alternative to romantic idealism, the practical choice for people who need concrete solutions rather than pretty words. But as Jae-hyun watches Haewon's face during this exchange, he sees something that gives him hope. Disgust. She's seeing through Min-ho's manipulation, recognizing the calculated cruelty beneath his polished presentation. The woman who fell in love with honesty, even when it was disguised by lies, is not impressed by sophisticated deception dressed up as opportunity. I think you should leave now, she says quietly, but her voice carries steel that makes Min-ho's confidence waver for the first time since he arrived. Certainly, he replies, rising smoothly and retrieving his expensive coat. But I hope you'll remember that opportunities like this are rare. When they disappear, they don't typically return. He pauses at the door, his gaze lingering on Jae-hyun with cruel satisfaction. Give my regards to your father, old friend. I'm sure he's very proud of the choices you've made. Then he's gone, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the toxic residue of threats disguised as generous offers. In the silence that follows his departure, the Kang family kitchen feels smaller, more vulnerable, as if Min-ho's presence has somehow contaminated the space with urban predation and corporate calculation. Well, Mr. Kang says finally, that was unpleasant. He'll be back, Jae-hyun says with grim certainty. Men like him don't give up after one rejection. He'll find ways to apply pressure, create problems that make his solutions seem necessary. Then we'll deal with those problems when they come, Mrs. Kang replies with the kind of quiet determination that has sustained rural families through decades of challenges. We've survived worse than smooth-talking businessmen with more money than sense. But Jae-hyun sees the worry in her eyes, the understanding that this threat is different from weather or market fluctuations or the normal difficulties of farm life. This is predation by people who have unlimited resources and no moral constraints, who see communities like this as obstacles to profit rather than human beings deserving of respect. And it's all his fault. His lies created the vulnerability that Minho is exploiting. But feeling sorry won't fix it. What matters now is what you plan to do to make it right. The afternoon finds Jae-hyun walking alone through the dormant peach orchard, his feet following paths worn by months of labor that now feel like memories from another lifetime. The trees stand bare against the gray winter sky, their branches reaching upward like prayers offered to an indifferent heaven. Everything looks smaller in winter's harsh light. The farm, the dreams, the possibilities that once seemed limitless. Behind him, the farmhouse windows glow with warm light as the Kang family gathers for their evening meal. He's not welcome at that table anymore. Not after the chaos he's brought to their peaceful world. Minho's visit has made that clear. His presence here doesn't protect this family. It endangers them. His phone buzzes with a text message from Director Kim at the Agricultural Cooperative. Decision needed by tomorrow on the development program. Board meeting scheduled. Need community support confirmed. The deadline he'd hoped would force a resolution has arrived, but instead of answers, he faces only impossible choices. The development program could genuinely help communities throughout the region, but launching it while Minho circles like a corporate vulture would put every participating family at risk of retaliation. Footsteps on the frost-hardened earth announce someone approaching through the orchard. Jae-hyun turns, expecting to see Mr. Kang coming to escort him off the property, but instead finds Haiwan walking toward him with the careful determination of someone who's made a difficult decision. She's changed from her market clothes into warm pants and a thick sweater, her hair pulled back in the practical style he remembers from their working days together. But there's something different in her bearing, a resolution that speaks of internal battles fought and won, of conclusions reached through painful honesty. "We need to talk," she says, stopping just beyond arm's reach. The distance feels deliberately maintained, a boundary that protects them both from the dangerous territory of renewed intimacy. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your time," he begins, but she cuts him off with a gesture. "You don't," she agrees. "But I have things to say, and I'd rather say them here than carry them around forever." They stand among the sleeping trees, two people who once shared dreams and labor and the kind of quiet understanding that felt like coming home. Now they face each other across a gulf created by betrayal and deepened by the complications of corporate predation and impossible choices. "I spent weeks hating you," she says without preamble. Hating Lee Jun-ho for lying. Hating Yoon Jae-hyun for existing. Hating myself for being stupid enough to believe that someone could just appear in our lives without ulterior motives. The words hit him like physical blows, but he accepts each one because they represent the truth he's been too cowardly to face fully. His deception didn't just break her heart. It made her doubt her own judgment, her ability to see people clearly, her instinct for trust that had always served her well. But then Minho showed up, she continues, her voice gaining strength. And I realized that there are different kinds of lies, different reasons people deceive each other. His lies are about taking whatever he wants without caring about the cost to other people. Your lies were about... She pauses, searching for words that can encompass the complexity of his motives. About wanting to be someone you weren't sure you could be. That doesn't make them better, he says quietly. No, it doesn't. But it makes them different. She begins walking slowly between the tree rows, and he falls into step beside her, maintaining the careful distance she's established. I've been thinking about the man I fell in love with, Lee Jun-ho. Was he completely fictional? The question cuts to the heart of everything he's been wrestling with since he left Damyang. I don't know, he admits. The name was fake. The background story was fake. The reason for being here was fake. But the way I felt working in these orchards, the way I felt sitting on your parents' porch in the evening, the way I felt when you laughed, that was all real. See, that's what I can't figure out. She stops beside a tree whose branches they pruned together months ago, her hand resting lightly on the bark. Were you acting like someone you wanted to be, or were you discovering someone you actually are? It's the most important question anyone has ever asked him, and the answer will determine not just their future, but his own sense of identity and purpose. Both, he says finally. I was performing a role, but the role taught me things about myself I never knew. Working with my hands, being valued for effort rather than inheritance, being part of something bigger than my own ambitions, that felt like coming home to parts of myself I didn't know existed. She nods slowly, as if this confirms something she'd suspected. My mother always says that the best way to understand someone's character is to watch how they behave when they think no one important is looking. But you thought everyone here was important. You worked harder for my father's approval than you probably ever worked for corporate success. Your father's approval meant something real, he says. Corporate success is just numbers on reports that get filed away and forgotten. But learning to tend these trees, earning your mother's trust, making you laugh, those things mattered in ways I'd never experienced. They've reached the edge of the orchard where it borders the vegetable garden, now dormant under winter's protection. This is where they spent their first working day together, where she taught him to distinguish between plants that needed attention and those that were thriving on their own. Minho offered me a job in Seoul, she says suddenly. Executive assistant, good salary, housing allowance, a chance to escape what he called the limitations of rural life. Jae-hyun's stomach clenches with jealousy and fear. Are you considering it? I was for about 5 minutes. Her smile carries no warmth. Until I realized what he was really offering. Not opportunity, control. Not advancement, dependence. He wants to own me the same way he wants to own this land, this community, everything he sees as undervalued and available for acquisition. And now? Now I'm wondering if there's a third option. She turns to face him fully, and he sees something in her eyes that might be hope or might be the prelude to goodbye. You mentioned a development program, something that could help farming communities without destroying them. The agricultural cooperative has approved the framework, he confirms. Sustainable farming education, equipment cooperatives, direct marketing support, financial assistance that strengthens rather than creates dependency. But it requires community trust, local leadership, long-term commitment from someone who understands both rural needs and urban resources. Someone like you? The suggestion hangs between them like a bridge that might support their weight or collapse under the pressure of everything unresolved between them. Someone like the person I discovered I could be when I was here before, he corrects. But that person was built on lies. I don't know if he can exist in the real world, with real responsibilities and honest relationships. Only one way to find out, she says practically. But it would mean giving up any chance of returning to your old life. Corporate doors that close for people who choose rural development over urban success don't typically reopen. I resigned from Yoon Industries yesterday, he says. Turned in my corporate card, cleaned out my office, signed papers that make my departure permanent and irrevocable. Whatever bridges I had to that world, they're burned. For the first time since he returned to Damyang, she smiles, Not the careful, guarded expression she's worn like armor, but the genuine warmth he remembers from their early days working together. And how does that feel? Terrifying, he admits, and liberating. And right in a way I've never felt about any decision in my adult life. They've walked the full circuit of the orchard and find themselves back where they started, standing in the shadow of the farmhouse where his deception began, and where, possibly, his redemption might start. The windows glow with the warm light of family gathered around the evening table, and he can smell the aroma of Mrs. Kang's cooking carried on the cold air. "I can't forgive you yet," Haewon says quietly. The lies cut too deep, caused too much damage. Trust once broken doesn't heal quickly or easily. His heart sinks, but he nods understanding. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hoped for the chance to prove that I learned something from the hurt I caused." "But," she continues, and that single word carries more hope than any elaborate declaration could, "I'm willing to see what you do with this second chance. If you can make this development program work, if you can actually help communities like ours instead of exploiting them, if you can prove that Lee Jun-ho wasn't just a role you played but a person you can become, then maybe we can talk about starting over." Starting over? The phrase seems too good to be true, too generous for someone who's caused as much damage as he has. "With honesty this time," she clarifies. "With your real name, your real background, your real challenges and limitations. I don't want to fall in love with another fictional character. But if there's a real man underneath all the corporate armor and family expectations, someone who can choose rural communities over urban success, someone who values building things over acquiring them, well, that person might be worth getting to know." The offer is conditional, fragile, hedged with understandable protections. But it's also more generous than he dared hope for, more grace than his deceptions deserve. "I won't let you down again," he promises, meaning it with every cell of his being. "You might," she says, with the kind of practical wisdom that has sustained her family through generations of uncertainty. "People fail even when they mean well. But if you do fail, fail honestly. Fail trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. I can work with honest failure. I can't work with lies disguised as good intentions." As they walk back toward the farmhouse together, not touching, not presuming intimacy they haven't re-earned, but moving in the same direction with shared purpose, Jae-hyun feels something he hasn't experienced since childhood: genuine hope for the future. Tomorrow, he'll present the development program to the agricultural cooperative. He'll face down Minho's corporate predation with community organizing instead of boardroom politics. He'll begin the long work of proving that transformation is possible, that people can change, that love built on truth is stronger than anything constructed from deception. But tonight, walking beside the woman whose heart he broke and whose forgiveness he's fighting to earn, he allows himself to believe that some stories get second chances, that some mistakes can be redeemed through honest effort and genuine commitment to becoming better. The lights of the farmhouse grow brighter as they approach, and for the first time since his deception was revealed, Jae-hyun feels like he might be coming home. 3 months later, the Damyang Community Development Center occupies a renovated building that once housed a defunct agricultural equipment store. The space buzzes with the kind of productive energy that comes from people working toward shared goals. Farmers huddled over laptops learning digital marketing, teenagers developing websites for local businesses, elderly residents sharing traditional knowledge with urban volunteers who've come to learn sustainable farming techniques. Jae-hyun moves through the organized chaos with the easy confidence of someone who's found his true calling. Gone are the expensive suits and corporate armor that once defined his identity. In their place, he wears practical work clothes that show the honest stains of physical labor, boots that have walked countless farm fields, and the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from work that matters beyond profit margins. The program has exceeded everyone's expectations, including his own. 15 farming families have increased their income by an average of 40% through direct-to-consumer sales channels. The equipment cooperative has reduced individual operating costs while improving productivity. Most importantly, young people who were leaving for urban opportunities are staying to build businesses that honor their rural heritage while embracing modern possibilities. But success in the development program is only part of the story. The more complex narrative involves his careful courtship of Hye-won's trust, a process that has been slower and more challenging than any corporate negotiation he ever conducted. She works at the center 3 days a week, managing the farmers' market cooperative and teaching traditional food preservation techniques to urban families, seeking authentic connections to rural life. Their relationship has evolved from wary collaboration to genuine friendship. But the careful boundaries she maintains remind him daily that trust, once shattered, rebuilds slowly through consistent action rather than passionate declarations. The Kim family wants to expand their organic certification to include livestock, she reports during their weekly planning meeting. And the park greenhouse operation is ready to supply restaurants in Seoul if we can work out the logistics. They sit across from each other at the conference table he built himself from reclaimed wood, their interaction professional, but warmed by the kind of mutual respect that grows from shared work and aligned values. She's changed over these months too, more confident in her business insights, more articulate about community needs, more comfortable with the leadership role she's grown into almost unconsciously. Transportation costs are still the biggest barrier, he notes, reviewing the spreadsheets that have become as familiar as the corporate reports he once analyzed. But if we can coordinate deliveries for multiple families, the economics work. Mrs. Lee has been talking to her nephew who runs a trucking company, Hye-won says. He's interested in setting up regular routes if we can guarantee sufficient volume. These conversations, focused on practical problems and concrete solutions, form the foundation of their rebuilt relationship. No dramatic gestures or romantic declarations, just the steady work of people who care about the same things and trust each other's judgment and commitment. The trust part, especially, represents a victory earned through hundreds of small choices. Showing up when he says he will, following through on promises, accepting criticism gracefully, prioritizing community needs over personal comfort. It's been the hardest and most rewarding education of his life. The meeting is interrupted by the arrival of Bora, who bursts through the door with the kind of urgent energy that usually signals either very good or very bad news. Her short hair is windblown from rushing across town, her cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. "You need to see this," she announces, brandishing her smartphone like evidence in a criminal case. Minho just held a press conference in Seoul. The three of them huddle around the small screen as Bora plays the video she recorded from a live news stream. Minho appears in his element, perfectly groomed, surrounded by corporate logos and legal documents, projecting the kind of authoritative competence that makes investors feel secure about complex financial decisions. "Today, I'm announcing the formation of the Rural Heritage Foundation," he declares to the assembled reporters. A comprehensive program designed to preserve traditional Korean farming communities while providing economic opportunities that respect cultural values and environmental sustainability. Jae-hyun feels his stomach drop as he recognizes his own development program's language and goals, being appropriated by the man who represents everything exploitative about corporate involvement in rural communities. The foundation has identified several target communities for initial investment, Minho continues, including the Damyang region, where preliminary research has identified significant potential for agricultural tourism, artisanal food production, and sustainable development initiatives. The video ends with Minho taking questions from reporters who clearly haven't done their homework about the communities they're discussing or the track record of the man making these promises. It's corporate public relations at its most cynical, using genuine community needs as marketing material for initiatives designed primarily to benefit investors rather than residents. "He's stealing your program," Bora says with the kind of righteous anger that makes her a fierce advocate for her friends. "Every idea, every structure, every innovation you've developed here, he's packaged it up and claimed it as his own invention." "It's worse than that," Jae-hyun says grimly, understanding the full implications of what they've just witnessed. "He's not just stealing the program. He's positioning himself to compete directly with us for communities, funding, and political support. And he has resources we can't match." Haewon studies his face with the kind of careful attention she's learned to pay when crisis threatens everything they've built together. "What does this mean for our families here, for the work we've started?" "It means we're about to be in a fight," he admits. "Minho will offer communities better initial terms, more impressive funding, faster implementation. He'll make our grassroots approach look amateur by comparison." "But his approach won't work," Bora protests. "It's all about corporate control and profit extraction. The families here would never fall for that." "Families facing financial pressure might," Haewon says with the practical wisdom that has guided her family through generations of uncertainty. "Especially if his offers seem more substantial than ours. If he can present credentials and resources that make him appear more reliable than someone who gave up his inheritance to start a rural development program." The brutal honesty of her assessment cuts deep, but it also clarifies what they're facing. This isn't just business competition, it's a battle for the soul of rural development, for the question of whether communities like Damyang will be strengthened by programs that respect their autonomy or consumed by initiatives that treat them as resources to be optimized. "There's something else," Hae-hyun says quietly, dreading what he has to reveal next. "Minho has political connections that we don't. If he can get government backing for his foundation, he can essentially force communities to choose his program by making ours ineligible for official support. The implications settle over them like a cold fog. Everything they've built, the trust, the partnerships, the demonstrated success, could be swept away by corporate maneuvering and political pressure that treats rural communities as pawns in larger economic games." "So what do we do?" Bora asks, her usual optimism strained by the scale of the challenge they're facing. Jae-hyun looks around the development center they've created together, the walls covered with photos of successful projects, the tables where families gather to plan and learn and support each other. The tangible evidence of what's possible when people work together toward shared goals rather than individual profit. "We do what we've always done," he says, feeling certainty crystallize in his chest. "We trust the communities we serve. We let our work speak for itself, and we fight for the people who've trusted us with their futures." It's not much of a strategy against Minho's corporate resources and political connections. But looking at Haewon's determined expression, seeing the resolve in Bora's eyes, feeling the strength that comes from knowing their motivations are genuine while their opponents are purely mercenary, Jae-hyun believes they might have weapons that money can't buy. The question is whether community loyalty and authentic relationships will be enough to overcome corporate predation backed by government authority. They're about to find out. The community meeting takes place in the school gymnasium, the same space where Jae-hyun danced with Haewon at the autumn festival that now feels like a lifetime ago. But tonight, instead of celebration, the air carries tension thick enough to cut. Families who've worked together for generations find themselves divided by competing visions of their future, by promises that seem too good to be true and warnings that might be motivated by jealousy rather than genuine concern. Minho has arrived with a presentation team that transforms the humble gymnasium into a corporate conference room. Professional displays showcase sleek architectural renderings of modernized farms, charts projecting impressive income increases, and photographs of similar programs from other countries that make rural life look like a luxury resort experience. He's dressed down for the occasion, expensive casual wear that's meant to suggest accessibility while still projecting urban sophistication. His team includes lawyers, agricultural consultants, and a government representative whose presence suggests official backing that carries significant weight with families who've learned to be wary of programs that lack institutional support. Jae-hyun sits in the back with Haiwan and other families who've participated in their community-controlled development program. His presentation materials consist of actual photographs from local farms, testimonials from participating families, and financial records that show real results rather than projected possibilities. Compared to Minho's polished production, their evidence looks amateur, grassroots, authentic in ways that might not compete effectively with corporate marketing. Ladies and gentlemen, Minho begins, his voice carrying easily through the gymnasium's acoustics. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the Rural Heritage Foundation's vision for communities like yours. The presentation unfolds with devastating effectiveness. Minho speaks fluently about preserving traditional values while embracing modern opportunities, about respecting local autonomy while providing resources that small communities can't access independently. He offers immediate financial assistance, guaranteed markets for agricultural products, and infrastructure improvements that would transform Damyang into a model for rural development throughout Korea. Most compelling of all, he presents government endorsements and corporate partnerships that promise stability and longevity, beyond what any individual or small organization could provide. The implicit message is clear. Choose the Foundation's program and gain access to resources and protection that will last for generations. I know some of you have concerns about outside involvement in your community affairs, Minho acknowledges with practiced humility. But I want to assure you that the Foundation's approach is designed to strengthen local control rather than replace it. We're offering partnership, not takeover, support for your own decisions rather than decisions made for you. The words are perfectly chosen to address every fear rural communities have about corporate development programs. But watching from the back of the room, Jae-hyun recognizes the subtle manipulations. Promises that sound specific but contain escape clauses, commitments that appear binding but include language that allows for necessary adjustments based on market conditions. When Minho opens the floor for questions, the responses reveal how effectively he's divided the community. Older residents express skepticism about any outside program, their years of experience making them wary of promises that seem too generous. Younger families voice excitement about opportunities that could let them build modern livelihoods without abandoning their rural heritage. Middle-aged farmers ask practical questions about timelines, requirements, and what happens if the promised benefits don't materialize. Mr. Kang, Minho says, addressing Haiwan's father directly, your family has been part of this community for generations. What would it mean to you to see your daughter's children able to build successful careers here, instead of moving to Seoul for opportunities? The question is expertly crafted to appeal to Mr. Kang's deepest hopes while implicitly criticizing the current limitations of rural life. That would be significant, he admits carefully. But promises are easy to make and hard to keep. We've seen programs before that started with good intentions and ended with families losing control of land they'd worked for generations. I understand your caution, Minho replies smoothly. That's exactly why the Foundation has built-in legal protections that guarantee family ownership remains intact. We're not trying to buy your land. We're trying to help you make it more productive and profitable. It's a masterful response that acknowledges legitimate concerns while providing reassurances that sound substantial but might not survive closer examination. Jae-hyun watches Hae-won's face during this exchange, seeing her wrestle with the same questions that are troubling every family in the room. How do you distinguish between genuine opportunity and sophisticated exploitation? How do you protect what you have while pursuing what you need? When Minho finishes his presentation to enthusiastic applause from roughly half the audience, the moderator invites Jae-hyun to present the alternative approach they've been developing together. Walking to the front of the gymnasium feels like crossing a minefield. These families have watched him transform from Lee Jun-ho, the humble accountant, to Yoon Jae-hyun, the disgraced heir to his current identity as a rural development advocate. Some of them trust the person he's proven himself to be through months of consistent effort. Others remain suspicious of anyone with his background and resources, regardless of his apparent commitment to their community. 3 months ago, he begins, his voice steadier than he feels. I came back to this community to ask for forgiveness and the chance to make amends for the lies I told when I lived here before. I didn't know if that would be possible, or what form making amends might take. He clicks to his first slide, not a professional rendering, but a photograph of Mrs. Park in her greenhouse, beaming with pride at vegetables that feed her family and provide income that keeps them on their land. What I've learned is that making amends isn't about grand gestures or impressive promises. It's about showing up every day to do work that matters, to support decisions made by communities for themselves, rather than decisions made for communities by outsiders. The presentation continues with testimonials from participating families, financial records that show real improvements in their circumstances, and documentation of increased local control over agricultural and economic decisions. Compared to Minho's slick production, it looks humble, but it carries the weight of actual experience and proven results. Mr. Choi's program offers immediate benefits and impressive resources, Jae-hyun acknowledges. Our program offers something different. The gradual building of capacity and autonomy that lets communities make their own choices about their futures. It's slower, messier, and sometimes frustrating. But it's also sustainable in ways that dependence on outside corporate partnerships might not be. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Immediate gratification versus long-term sustainability, impressive promises versus modest but proven results, corporate partnership versus community autonomy. Both approaches have merit, but they represent fundamentally different philosophies about development and different assumptions about what rural communities need most. During the question period that follows, the divisions within the community become more apparent. Families who've participated in Jae-hyun's program speak passionately about increased income and maintained independence. Others express frustration with the slow pace of change and worry that more aggressive competitors will capture market opportunities, while they debate philosophical approaches to development. The question, says Mrs. Kim, whose family has farmed in Damyang for 5 generations, is whether we trust ourselves to make good decisions if we have proper support, or whether we need experts to make decisions for us because the modern world is too complicated for farmers to navigate alone. Her formulation cuts to the heart of everything. Minho's program assumes rural communities need sophisticated outside management to succeed in contemporary markets. Jae-hyun's approach assumes they need resources and support to make their own informed decisions. Both philosophies have appealing elements, but they lead to radically different outcomes for community autonomy and long-term sustainability. As the meeting winds down, families cluster in small groups, discussing options in the kind of intense, careful conversations that rural communities have when facing decisions that will affect their children's futures. Jae-hyun watches these discussions with a mixture of pride and anxiety, knowing that everything he's worked for depends on people choosing community control over corporate efficiency. Hae-won approaches him as he packs up his modest presentation materials, "How do you think it went?" she asks. "I think we gave them a real choice," he replies. "That's all we could do, present genuine alternatives and trust people to make informed decisions about what they want for their community. And if they choose Minho's program, then they choose it," he says, meaning it despite the way the possibility breaks his heart. Democracy is messier than corporate efficiency, but it's also more honest. People have to be free to make their own mistakes if they're going to be free to make their own successes. But as they walk out of the gymnasium together, both of them know that this decision involves more than competing development philosophies. It's a referendum on transformation itself, whether people can change, whether trust can be rebuilt, whether love built on truth is stronger than relationships constructed from convenience. The week following the community meeting passes in a haze of private conversations, family debates, and the kind of careful community diplomacy that small towns employ when facing decisions that could reshape their future forever. Jae-hyun finds himself caught between hope and resignation, watching from the sidelines as families he's grown to love wrestle with choices that will determine not just their economic future, but the very character of their community. Minho has established temporary headquarters at the town's only hotel, conducting individual meetings with farming families and offering increasingly generous terms to early adopters of his program. The strategy is sophisticated and effective. Create momentum through selective incentives, then use that momentum to pressure holdouts into compliance. It's exactly the kind of corporate maneuvering Jae-hyun once employed himself, and recognizing his own former tactics makes witnessing them even more painful. Meanwhile, the families who've participated in the grassroots development program find themselves in an impossible position, defending modest but real progress against promises of dramatic transformation, arguing for slow community building against the appeal of immediate financial relief. The Park family signed with Minho yesterday, Bo-ra reports during their morning meeting at the development center. Mrs. Park said they couldn't afford to wait for gradual improvement when their daughter needs surgery next month. Jae-hyun nods grimly. What about the Lees? Still undecided. Mr. Lee likes our approach, but his son is pushing for Minho's program. Says if they don't modernize now, they'll be left behind when other families start benefiting from foundation resources. The defections hurt, but Jae-hyun understands them. Rural families facing immediate financial pressures can't afford to be philosophical about development approaches. When corporate programs offer guaranteed income and his grassroots alternative requires patience and faith in gradual progress, the choice becomes less about ideology and more about survival. There's something else. Bo-ra continues, her expression troubled. Minho has been asking questions about your personal finances, how you're funding the development program, whether you have sustainable resources for long-term commitments. He's trying to create doubt about whether our program will survive if you lose interest or run out of money. It's a legitimate concern dressed up as character assassination. Minho knows that Jae-hyun's personal funding makes their program vulnerable in ways that corporate backing doesn't. If families believe the grassroots approach depends entirely on one person's continued commitment, they'll naturally gravitate toward the institutional stability that the foundation represents. The irony is devastating. Jae-hyun's sacrifice of corporate security to pursue authentic rural development has made him less trustworthy in the eyes of people who need long-term reliability above all else. That afternoon, walking alone through the town center, he encounters clusters of families engaged in the intense, quiet conversations that precede community decisions. Some wave and smile with the warmth he's earned through months of consistent effort. Others nod politely but avoid extended interaction, and he understands that his presence complicates their decision-making process. At the market, he stops by Haiwon's stall, where she's arranging late-season vegetables with the same careful attention he remembers from their early days together. She looks up as he approaches, and her smile carries the kind of weary affection that comes from shared struggle and mutual respect earned through difficult circumstances. "How are you holding up?" she asks, and the question encompasses everything: the community divisions, the professional challenges, the personal uncertainty that marks every aspect of his current life. "I'm learning what it means to believe in something without knowing if it will succeed," he admits, settling onto the small stool beside her display table. "It's terrifying and liberating simultaneously." "Welcome to farming," she says with gentle humor. "Every season is an act of faith that rain will come, that seeds will grow, that markets will value what you've produced. The uncertainty never gets easier, but you learn to find peace within it." They work together in comfortable silence, arranging produce and serving customers with the kind of easy partnership that has developed over months of collaboration. It's not romantic in any conventional sense. They maintain careful boundaries, avoid intimate conversations, focus on practical cooperation rather than emotional connection. But there's something deeply satisfying about working beside her, about being useful in small but meaningful ways. "My parents have been talking about Minho's offer," she says during a lull between customers. "Papa is suspicious of any program that promises immediate benefits without clear long-term costs. Mama worries about what happens to community relationships when some families get different benefits than others. And you?" She considers the question with the same careful attention she gives to selecting the perfect peach. "I think both programs could work under the right circumstances with the right people running them. The question isn't whether corporate development or grassroots organizing is inherently better. The question is whether we trust the people offering each approach." It's a more nuanced analysis than either he or Minho presented at the community meeting, and it cuts to the heart of everything that's been troubling him about this competition. The philosophical differences between their approaches matter, but they matter less than the character and motivations of the people implementing them. "Do you trust me?" he asks, the question emerging before his rational mind can stop it. She pauses in her work, her hands still on the vegetables she's been arranging. When she looks at him, her expression carries all the complexity of their shared history. The love that grew from his deception, the betrayal that shattered her trust, the gradual rebuilding that has defined these past months. "I trust the person you've shown yourself to be since you came back," she says carefully. "I trust your commitment to this community, your willingness to sacrifice personal advantage for principles that matter to you. But trust is different from certainty. I can trust your intentions without knowing whether you'll succeed, whether you'll change again, whether the person you are now is who you'll be in 5 years when the work gets harder and the rewards seem smaller." "And Minho?" "I don't trust him at all," she says without hesitation. "His motivations are transparent, his methods are manipulative, and his program is designed to benefit him more than the communities he claims to serve. But that doesn't mean his program won't work, at least in the short term. Sometimes untrustworthy people deliver valuable results, and sometimes trustworthy people fail despite their best intentions." The brutal honesty of her assessment forces him to confront questions he's been avoiding. What if Minho's corporate program actually produces better outcomes for rural families, despite his questionable motivations? What if Jae-hyun's grassroots approach fails not because it's philosophically wrong, but because he lacks the skills or resources to implement it effectively? "So how do families choose, Kantus?" he asks. "They choose based on what they can afford to lose," she replies. "Families with savings and stable situations can afford to invest in gradual, community-controlled development. Families facing immediate crises need immediate solutions, regardless of long-term implications. Both positions are rational, which is why this decision has been so difficult for everyone." So, that evening, Jae-hyun sits in his small room at the inn. surrounded by financial projections and strategic plans that suddenly seem inadequate to the complexity of real human lives facing impossible choices. Through his window, he can see the lights of farmhouses where families are weighing their futures, trying to balance hope against fear, community values against individual needs. His phone buzzes with a text from his father. Board meeting tomorrow. Final vote on corporate restructuring that could affect rural programs. Your input would be valuable if you're interested in protecting what you've built. The message represents an opportunity and a test. Returning to Seoul, even briefly, would mean abandoning his commitment to staying in Damyang during the community's decision-making process. But it might also mean gaining access to resources and influence that could protect rural development programs from corporate predation. Another choice between competing goods, another decision that requires choosing what to sacrifice in service of what to protect. Outside his window, Damyang settles into another night of uncertainty, and Jae-hyun realizes that learning to live with uncertainty, to act with conviction despite incomplete information, to maintain hope despite the possibility of failure, might be the most important education of his entire life. Tomorrow, the community will announce their decision. Whatever they choose, he'll respect it and find a way to support it. Because that's what love actually means. Not getting what you want, but wanting what's best for the people you care about, even when those two things are completely different. Morning arrives with the first snow of winter, transforming Damyang into a landscape of pristine white that makes everything look new and possible. Jae-hyun stands at his window watching families emerge from their homes, their breath visible in the cold air as they make their way toward the community center, where the final decision will be announced. He slept poorly, wrestling with dreams that mixed memories of his corporate life with visions of the rural community he's grown to love. But waking to snow feels like a gift, a reminder that seasons change, that endings can be beginnings, that beauty often emerges from the starkest circumstances. The community center fills slowly with families who've spent the week in intense private discussions, their faces showing the weight of decisions that will echo through generations. Minho arrives precisely on time, flanked by his team of lawyers and consultants, projecting the kind of professional confidence that suggests he already knows the outcome. Jae-hyun enters alone, carrying nothing but a thermos of coffee and the kind of peace that comes from knowing he's done everything possible to present an honest alternative to corporate control. Win or lose, he's discovered something about himself that no business school or corporate success could have taught him. The satisfaction of fighting for something larger than personal advancement. Director Kim from the Agricultural Cooperative serves as moderator, his weathered face betraying no hint of which way the community has decided. Before we announce the results of our deliberations, he begins, I want to thank both Mr. Choi and Mr. Yoon for presenting their programs to our community. Having genuine choices is a luxury that rural areas don't always enjoy. The polite formality does nothing to ease the tension that fills the room like electricity before a storm. Families sit together, but the careful divisions within the community are visible in the way groups position themselves, in the guarded expressions that suggest relationships strained by competing loyalties. After extensive discussion and careful consideration of both proposals, Director Kim continues, Our community has reached a decision that I hope reflects our values and our aspirations for the future. He pauses, and Jae-hyun can hear his own heartbeat in the silence that follows. Beside him, Haewon sits with her parents, her face composed, but her hands clenched in her lap with the kind of tension that speaks to how much this decision means to everyone present. We have decided, Director Kim announces, to decline both programs as they were presented. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Jae-hyun feels his stomach drop, but not with personal disappointment, with concern for families who've rejected outside help when they genuinely need resources and support. Minho's confident expression, transforms into barely controlled fury as he realizes his sophisticated manipulation has been entirely rejected by people he underestimated. However, Director Kim continues before the implications can fully sink in. We have also decided to propose a third alternative that incorporates elements from both approaches while maintaining community control over all decisions. He gestures toward Mrs. Kang, who rises from her seat with the dignity of someone who's been chosen to speak for her community. We spent the week discussing not just which program to choose, but what kind of community we want to be. And we realized that the choice between Mr. Choi's corporate program and Mr. Yoon's grassroots approach was a false choice. Her voice carries the authority of generations of rural wisdom as she explains their decision. Mr. Choi offers resources we need, but with control we can't accept. Mr. Yoon offers control we want, but with resources that depend too heavily on one person's commitment. So we've decided to create something that combines resource access with community autonomy. The proposal that emerges is brilliant in its simplicity and sophisticated in its understanding of both corporate structures and community needs. Rather than choosing between programs, Damyang will establish a community-controlled foundation that can partner with multiple resource providers while maintaining local decision-making authority. Mr. Yoon has agreed to transfer his personal funding commitment to this community foundation, Mrs. Kang explains. Mr. Choi's corporate partners are welcome to contribute resources, but under terms that prioritize community benefit over investor returns. And families who need immediate assistance can receive it through emergency funds, while longer-term development proceeds at a pace the community controls. Jae-hyun stares at Mrs. Kang in amazement. He never agreed to transfer his funding, but as she speaks, he realizes this is exactly what should happen. His personal resources should serve community needs rather than depending on his continued presence and commitment. Min-ho, meanwhile, looks like he swallowed something distasteful. His program has been gutted of everything that made it profitable for him while preserving elements that could genuinely benefit rural families. This arrangement would require significant modification of the Foundation's standard operating procedures, he says carefully. Then modify them, Mr. Kang replies with the blunt honesty that rural families employ when cutting through corporate complexity. Or find communities that want to sacrifice autonomy for efficiency. We've chosen differently. The meeting continues for another hour, working through practical details of implementation, governance structures, and accountability mechanisms. But the fundamental decision has been made. Damyang will chart its own course, using resources from multiple sources while maintaining control over its own development priorities. As families file out of the community center, their conversations carry the energy of people who've discovered they have more power than they realized. Instead of choosing between competing programs designed by outsiders, they've created their own approach that serves their specific needs and values. Min-ho departs with his team, his expensive car disappearing into the snowy landscape like a bad dream fading with dawn. His parting words to Jae-hyun carry the venom of a man who's been outmaneuvered by people he considered inferior. Enjoy your rural paradise. When this community foundation runs out of money and good intentions aren't enough to pay bills, you'll discover what the real world is like. But watching families celebrate their decision to maintain control over their own future, Jae-hyun realizes that Min-ho still doesn't understand what he's witnessed. This isn't idealistic rural fantasy triumphing over corporate realism. This is practical community organizing that's more sophisticated than any boardroom strategy he ever developed. As the crowd thins, Haiwan approaches him with an expression he can't quite read. Surprised? She asks. Amazed, he corrects. Your mother just taught me more about organizational strategy than I learned in business school. How did you know I'd agree to transfer the funding? Because, she says, with the first fully warm smile he's seen from her since his deception was revealed. "I've been watching you for months, learning who you really are when you think no one important is looking. And the person I've been watching would never hold community development hostage to personal credit or control." The compliment hits him harder than any professional recognition ever has. She sees him clearly, not the corporate heir or the reformed deceiver, but the person he's actually become through choosing community service over individual advancement. "There's something else," she continues, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty that suggests this next part is more personal than organizational. "The foundation will need someone to manage day-to-day operations, someone who understands both rural communities and resource development. The board has asked if you'd be interested in the position." The offer represents everything he's hoped for without daring to ask. The chance to continue serving this community, to build something sustainable rather than dependent on personal commitment, to prove through sustained effort that transformation is possible. "What would the job involve?" he asks, though he already knows he'll accept whatever they're offering. "Coordination between the foundation and resource partners, community liaison for development projects, grant writing and financial management. Basically, everything you've been doing for the past 3 months, but with community oversight and institutional support instead of personal funding. It's not glamorous work. The salary will be modest, the challenges constant, the recognition minimal. But looking at her face, seeing the hope in her eyes, feeling the weight of community trust settling on his shoulders like a mantle of honor rather than burden, he knows this is exactly where he belongs. "I'd like that very much," he says simply. "Good," she replies, "because I told them you'd already said yes." They walk out of the community center together into the snowy morning. Two people who've learned that love isn't about getting what you want, but about building something worthy of the trust you've been given. The snow continues to fall, covering their footprints as they move forward together, writing a new story in the pristine white landscape of possibility. Spring arrives early in Damyang, painting the valley in the soft green of new growth and filling the air with the sweet promise of peach blossoms. 6 months have passed since the community decided to chart its own course for development, and the results speak for themselves. Increased farm income, improved infrastructure, and most importantly, strengthened local control over decisions that affect their future. Jae-hyun stands in the orchard where his deception first took root, watching Haewon move between the trees with the unconscious grace of someone completely at home in their environment. She's checking for signs of pest damage, her trained eye catching details that escape his still-learning attention. The morning light catches in her hair, and he feels the same tightening in his chest that he experienced that first day when he watched her gather scattered peaches in the rain. But everything is different now. The love that began with lies has been rebuilt on the foundation of shared work, mutual respect, and the kind of trust that can only come from seeing someone choose service over self-interest repeatedly, consistently, without fanfare or expectation of reward. "The Peterson trees are showing early fruit set," she reports, making notes in the tablet that's become as much a part of her equipment as pruning shears and spray bottles. "If the weather holds, we should have an exceptional harvest this year." They've been working together daily for months now, but carefully, professionally, maintaining the boundaries she established during his early return to Damyang. He's respected those boundaries completely, understanding that trust rebuilds through actions rather than words, through demonstrated reliability rather than romantic gestures. "The Farmers Market Cooperative wants to expand to sole delivery," he mentions, reviewing the morning's emails on his own tablet. 3 restaurants are interested in direct purchasing agreements if we can guarantee consistent quality and supply. Can we? With the storage and transportation improvements the foundation funded, yes. The Park family's new cooling system means we can maintain quality for extended periods. and the cooperative truck route is finally profitable. These conversations, focused on practical problems and community benefit, form the substance of their rebuilt relationship. No dramatic declarations or passionate scenes, just the steady work of people who care about the same things and trust each other's judgment and commitment. But today, something feels different in the air between them. Maybe it's the spring warmth that makes everything seem possible, or maybe it's the way she keeps glancing at him when she thinks he's not looking, her expression carrying a softness that suggests internal barriers slowly dissolving. "There's going to be a celebration tomorrow night," she says as they move toward the next section of orchard. The cooperative is hosting a dinner to mark the foundation's first year of operation. Kind of a community thank you for everyone who's made it work. "That sounds nice," he replies, though celebration feels premature when there's still so much work to be done. "I was wondering," she continues, her voice carrying the careful tone of someone testing uncertain waters, "if you'd like to go together. Not as colleagues or foundation partners, but as—" She pauses, searching for the right word. "As people who've been through something difficult together and might be ready to see what comes next." The invitation hangs in the spring air between them like a bridge that might support their weight or collapse under the pressure of history. He stops walking, turns to face her fully, and sees in her eyes something he hasn't seen since that afternoon in the greenhouse when she first confessed her feelings. Vulnerability mixed with hope, fear balanced by trust. "Are you sure?" he asks, meaning the question to encompass everything. Forgiveness for his deceptions, willingness to risk her heart again, belief that the person he's become is worthy of the love she once offered so generously. "I'm not sure about anything," she admits with characteristic honesty. "I'm not sure love can survive the kind of betrayal we went through. I'm not sure you won't change again if circumstances pressure you in different directions. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to rebuild trust that was so completely broken." Her candor should discourage him, but instead it gives him hope. This is the woman he fell in love with, someone who faces reality without illusions, who builds relationships on truth rather than pretty fantasies, who has the courage to risk her heart even when the outcome is uncertain. "But," she continues, stepping closer to him beneath the blossoming trees, "I'm also not sure that safety is more important than possibility. And I know that the man I've worked beside for the past months, the person who chose community service over corporate success, who's shown up every day to do work that matters, that man is someone I'd like to know better. Even knowing who I used to be, knowing what I'm capable of when I'm scared or selfish or desperate. Especially knowing those things," she replies, reaching out to touch his hand with fingers that are warm and sure. Love that only exists when people are perfect isn't really love at all. It's just admiration for an image. Real love sees people clearly, their flaws and their potential, their failures and their growth, and chooses them anyway. The kiss that follows is nothing like their first kiss in the greenhouse, that desperate collision of need and deception, beautiful but poisoned by lies. This kiss is gentle, tentative, honest in ways that make his chest ache with gratitude and hope. It tastes like possibility and smells like peach blossoms and feels like coming home to himself. When they break apart, both breathing unsteadily, she rests her forehead against his and speaks words that heal something deep in his soul. "I love you, Yoon Jae-hyun. Not the person you pretended to be, not who you might become, but exactly who you are right now. Someone who's learned to choose love over fear, community over comfort, truth over convenience." "I love you too," he replies, meaning it with every cell of his being. "I love your strength, your wisdom, your willingness to see the best in people even when they've disappointed you. I love the way you make everything around you grow, plants, communities, hearts that thought they were too broken to heal." They spend the rest of the morning working together in the orchard, but now their collaboration carries a different energy. Partnership that includes affection, professional respect enhanced by personal connection, shared purpose deepened by renewed intimacy. It's everything he dreamed of during those long months of earning back her trust, but better because it's real, built on truth rather than fantasy. That evening, sitting on the porch of the farmhouse where his deception began, sharing dinner with her parents who've become his own chosen family, Jae-hyun feels a peace that has nothing to do with achievement or recognition, and everything to do with belonging. The conversation flows around him. Plans for the coming harvest, gossip about neighbors, gentle teasing about his continuing struggles with traditional cooking techniques. "You've gotten better at kimchi preparation," Mrs. Kang observes, with the generous kindness that welcomed him even when he deserved only suspicion. Last month's batch was almost edible. "High praise," Mr. Kang adds with dry humor. "She told me it took her 3 years to master proper fermentation. You might achieve adequacy within the decade." Their acceptance means more than any board approval or corporate recognition ever did. These people have seen him at his worst and his best, have watched him struggle with the daily work of becoming someone worthy of their trust, have chosen to include him in their family, despite every reason to keep him at arm's length. As the evening settles around them with the comfortable rhythm of rural life, distant sounds of farm work ending for the day, children playing in neighboring yards, the soft lowing of cattle preparing for night, Haiwan's hand finds his beneath the table. Her fingers intertwine with his and he feels the simple miracle of being known completely and loved anyway. "Thank you," he says quietly, meaning it for everything. Forgiveness he didn't deserve, second chances he never expected, the opportunity to build a life that honors both his responsibilities and his heart. "For what?" she asks, though her smile suggests she understands. "For seeing who I could become before I knew it myself," he replies. "For believing that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define futures, that love is strong enough to survive even the worst betrayals." "Love didn't survive," she corrects gently. "Love grew. What we had before was beautiful but fragile because it was built on incomplete truth. What we have now is different, deeper, more real, strong enough to weather whatever challenges come next." As night falls over the valley that has become his home, Jae-hyun realizes that this is what happiness actually feels like. Not the rush of achievement or the satisfaction of conquest, but the quiet certainty of being exactly where he belongs, with exactly the right person, doing exactly the work that gives his life meaning. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, continuing struggles to balance individual needs with community benefit. Ongoing questions about how to build sustainable rural development without compromising local autonomy. But tonight, surrounded by family and held by love that has survived the test of truth, he allows himself to believe that some stories really do have happy endings. They just look different than he expected, less dramatic, more daily, rooted in the soil of real life rather than floating in the fantasy of romantic idealism. The autumn festival returns to Damyang with all its traditional splendor, but this year carries an additional layer of celebration. The Community Foundation has completed its first full year of operation, successfully funding 17 different development projects while maintaining local control over every decision. The model has attracted attention from rural communities throughout Korea, and delegations arrive weekly to study what Damyang has accomplished through cooperative self-determination. Jae-hyun moves through the festival crowds with the easy confidence of someone who belongs, greeting friends and neighbors who've watched his transformation from corporate heir to community organizer with the kind of acceptance that rural communities offer to people who prove themselves through consistent action rather than impressive credentials. He pauses at the Kang family's festival booth, where Heywan and her mother sell jars of preserves, pickled vegetables, and traditional sweets that have become famous throughout the region. The demand for their products has grown so much that they've hired 2 additional workers and invested in expanded production facilities. Success that honors tradition while embracing sustainable growth. "How are sales?" he asks, settling beside Heywan at the table, covered with colorful jars and handwritten labels that make each product look like a gift rather than a commodity. "We'll sell out before evening," she reports with satisfaction. The peach preserves especially. People are calling them the taste of authentic Korea and paying premium prices for authenticity they can't find in commercial products. "Good problem to have," he observes, watching her make change for a customer who's bought enough preserves to stock a small store. "Though it means more late nights in the kitchen." "Worth it," she replies, her smile carrying the glow of someone doing work that perfectly matches her skills and values. Mama says this is the most successful harvest season in her memory. They're interrupted by the arrival of Bo-ra, who approaches with the kind of excitement that usually signals important news. She's changed over the year too. Her experience working with the foundation has developed her natural organizational skills into genuine expertise in rural development coordination. 3 other communities have hired her as a consultant, and she's building a career that lets her support rural growth while staying connected to her home region. "You need to see this," she announces, brandishing her smartphone with characteristic enthusiasm. The Ministry of Agriculture just announced their new rural development guidelines, and they're based almost entirely on the Damyang model. The news is significant beyond its immediate implications. Government adoption of their approach means communities throughout Korea will have access to the resources and autonomy that Damyang has demonstrated are not only compatible, but mutually reinforcing. Corporate programs that prioritize investor returns over community benefit will face competition from alternatives that respect local control while providing genuine support. "Minho is going to hate this," Bo-ra adds with satisfaction. His foundation has been struggling since they can't find communities willing to sacrifice autonomy for resources anymore. Jae-hyun feels no satisfaction in his former rival's difficulties. Minho's failure represents the victory of community organizing over corporate manipulation, but it also reminds him of how easily he could have become the kind of person who uses others' vulnerabilities for personal advantage. "Success in helping rural communities is success for everyone," he says diplomatically. Even if people's approaches were problematic, the underlying goal of rural development serves important social needs. "You're too generous," Bo-ra protests. Minho tried to exploit people who trusted him. He deserves whatever professional difficulties he's facing. Before Jae-hyun can respond, the conversation is interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. His father, Chairman Yoon Sang-min, approaches the festival booth with the careful dignity of someone entering unfamiliar territory, but determined to navigate it with respect. He's dressed simply for the occasion, expensive clothes worn without ostentation, urban sophistication muted to avoid offending rural sensibilities. But what strikes Jae-hyun most is his father's expression, not the corporate authority he usually projects, but something closer to curiosity mixed with paternal pride. "Father," Jae-hyun rises, uncertain about the protocol for greeting the man who represents everything he's walked away from. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to see what you've built here," Chairman Yoon replies, his gaze taking in the festival scenes around them. Families celebrating shared accomplishments, vendors selling products that represent generations of tradition and craftsmanship, children playing games that connect them to cultural heritage while preparing them for contemporary challenges. "And what do you think?" His father considers the question seriously, studying the festival with the analytical skills that built his business empire, but applying them to evaluate completely different measures of success. "I think," he says finally, that you've accomplished something I never could, building prosperity that strengthens communities rather than extracting wealth from them. The compliment is unexpected and generous, carrying the weight of professional recognition from someone whose approval Jae-hyun once craved, but no longer needs. "Thank you," he says simply. "I also think," Chairman Yoon continues with a slight smile, "that your mother would be proud of the man you've become. She always believed that true success means serving something larger than personal ambition." The mention of his mother, who died when he was still young enough to believe that love and work could be the same thing, brings unexpected emotion to Jae-hyun's throat. "I hope so," he manages. "I know so." His father's expression grows more serious. "Which is why I wanted to discuss something with you. The company board has approved the establishment of a rural development division focused on supporting community-controlled programs throughout Korea. We'd like you to consider leading it." The offer hangs in the festival air like a bridge between his two worlds: corporate resources combined with rural development expertise, family business integrated with community service, the possibility of serving both his inherited responsibilities and his chosen values. "It would mean occasional travel to Seoul," Chairman Yoon continues. "Board meetings, strategic planning sessions, coordination with government agencies. But the work would be based here, in communities like this one, supporting local decisions rather than imposing corporate priorities." Jae-hyun looks at Hae-won, who's been listening to this exchange with the careful attention she pays to any decision that might affect their shared future. Her expression carries support rather than pressure, trust in his judgment rather than fear about his choices. "I'd need to discuss it with the foundation board," he says carefully. "Any new role would have to complement rather than compete with community-controlled development." "Of course," his father agrees. "I wouldn't expect anything else from the son who taught me that sustainable business success requires genuine partnership rather than sophisticated exploitation." The festival continues around them. Traditional performances on the main stage, families sharing food and stories, children learning folk dances that connect them to their heritage while preparing them for an uncertain but promising future. This is what Jae-hyun fought for during those long months of earning back trust and proving his transformation. The right to be part of something authentic, meaningful, rooted in relationships rather than transactions. As evening approaches and the festival begins its traditional conclusion with community dancing under paper lanterns, Hae-won slips her hand into his and leads him toward the forming circle. This time he doesn't need instruction in the steps, doesn't feel like an outsider trying to fit into someone else's celebration. This time, he belongs. Dancing with her under the stars, surrounded by families who've become his chosen community, working toward goals that serve something larger than individual advancement. Jae-hyun finally understands what his mother meant when she told him that the best life is one that matters to people other than yourself. The music swells around them, traditional melodies that have celebrated countless harvests and held communities together through seasons of plenty and years of struggle. And in the sound of that music, in the warmth of Hae-won's hand in his, in the knowledge that tomorrow will bring more work that genuinely matters, he finds the happiness that no amount of corporate success could ever provide. Some stories end with dramatic gestures and passionate declarations. Others end with the quiet satisfaction of work well done, love honestly earned, and belonging genuinely achieved. This story ends with music and laughter and the promise of seasons yet to come. Simple things that turn out to be everything worth fighting for. As the last notes fade and families begin the gentle ritual of ending another successful celebration, Hae-won turns to him with eyes that shine with contentment and love and hope for all the tomorrows they'll build together. "Ready to go home?" she asks, and the question encompasses everything. The farmhouse where they'll soon share meals and dreams, the community they'll continue serving together, the life they've constructed from truth and trust, and the patience to let love grow at its own natural pace. "I'm already there," he replies, meaning it completely. And under the stars that shine equally on rural valleys and urban towers, on corporate headquarters and family farms, on all the places where people struggle to build lives worth living, their story finds its ending in the most beautiful beginning of all, the promise that some love once earned through honesty and sustained through service lasts forever. If this story moved you, if you found yourself rooting for Jaehyun and Haiwan as they navigated the complex path from deception to truth, from betrayal to forgiveness, from individual ambition to community service, please consider subscribing for more stories that explore what it means to transform, to grow, to build love on foundations strong enough to last. Their journey reminds us that the best endings aren't about getting what we want, but about becoming people worthy of what we receive.